What's up, benches? Hello. It's time for the show. Jump scare right at the end of the song there. How's it going? How's the day? It's Wednesday, my dudes. I have not had a single person in the YouTube chat say hello. Y'all don't want to grill? Y'all not trying to grill? What's up, Baphomet? And hello, Nouvenon. I thought Wednesday was for the boys, not the frickin' grills. Listen, you have to give a little bit of time to everybody, okay? Got to give a little bit to everybody. Besides, I mean, listen, I know that the boys and the grills, they don't always get along, but sometimes you got to get together with the boys to grill. Anyway. Hi, Junebug. Hi, Drea. Hello. Yes, it's hump day, indeed. Hump day. Air needs love, too. Yeah. I want to be your fucking... Amen. Amen. I'm having I'm experiencing some indecision around whether I want to continue drinking on a regular basis. We discussed it a little bit last show. Yeah. The last property I gardened came with boss music. Oh, that sounds terrifying. Good to be inside. Yes, yes. Inside is good. Inside is a good place to be. There we go. Dally and Tubian in the YouTube chat. Hello. What's up, Dank Cat Lord, Psychoplebeian, Cursed Chaos? Hello, hello. So I do want to grill today, and part of that might be... So I don't actually even know if the premiere is done. Y'all know Dead Domain, I assume, because they're fucking badass, okay? They posted a video today. It's an expose on Brianna Wu, and I started watching it during the premiere earlier, and then like a few minutes ago, I paused it to do something, and I was like, oh my god, I've been watching this video for an hour and 13 minutes. So it was like already an hour and 13 minutes, and I could see the little status bar of the video, and I was like, oh my god, there's like at least another hour of this. So, okay, the premiere is done. It is a 2-hour and 19-minute video, which I watched half of it earlier. Yeah, it came out today. It literally just stopped premiering. It started at like noon. So I was actually thinking we might watch at least parts of it together, because it was really interesting for the first half that I watched, and I haven't seen the second half. I do encourage you all to watch it in full, because I don't know if I would have time to go over all of it today, but I think even looking at just the beginning parts is like pretty damning as a foundation of who Brianna Wu is. When I read the title, I wondered what kind of meat is TT. It's a crying face. It's sad, crying face. Anyway, yeah, how is everybody? I drink tea, best drink ever. You know what? I've actually been drinking tea way more recently. I have discovered that I do like tea. I did not used to like tea. And now I've realized that it's just that I needed good tea. Similar with honey. I used to think I didn't like honey, and it turns out you just need to buy good honey, and then you'll like it better, instead of like the cheapest possible honey option. I still use a super cheap honey option when I cook, because I'm like, girl, you don't need the complexities of the flavors of honey if you're just going to cook it. I make, on a regular basis, I make a chicken thigh meal with root vegetables and honey mustard. And by honey mustard, I mean I take some Dijon mustard and some honey, and I cook it in there. And it's a quite interesting dish. Puggles, thank you for the 5 Australian units. Happy tree, indeed. Oh my god, I can't even tell you how much I love trees. I agree with every sentiment you have just portrayed. I would pay more attention if we watched it together. Yeah. But I've been doing like, I've started a self-care routine in the morning where the first thing I do in the day, sometimes I have to get up and pee first, but the first thing I do in the day is I take a moment to appreciate how comfortable my bed is and like really try to feel a sense of gratitude about it. Then I get up, I make my bed. Not fancy, but you know, it's you. Okay, here's a little adult note from me to you. as someone who's in their 30s, let me tell you about being an adult. If you fluff your pillow every morning when you wake up, the pillow lasts longer. So if you're like me and you got a shitty fucking pillow from Walmart, they flatten out pretty quick. So in the morning, I make my bed, and part of that is like fluffing the pillow and trying to make sure it still has a lot of body and volume. And I have bought the same pillow, the same exact pillow previously, and I ended up throwing it out basically because it just got flat almost immediately. But now I fluff up my pillows and it makes a difference. So I appreciate how warm my bed is. I get up and make the bed. I brush my teeth and wash my face. And then I come out and do tea, sometimes coffee, but usually tea. And then I step outside for like 10 minutes with my tea. And it's been a great way to start the day. It's so good. Pillow fluffing should be an Olympic sport, true. Should I go buy milk or should I just buy ramen for today? That is quite a decision. Lots of good local honey around the PNW. Yes, I have some honey from back home, like that we brought with us, that I'm still working my way through. But yes, I do also have. Oh, hold on. I need to make sure. Hold on. My microphone control app is not open. Okay, now it's open. Good, 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 good. Okay, thank you again, Puggles, for that, what ended up being $3.20 American. Oh, so fun news, oh no, I have to do this. So it turns out I actually can do a full week of working out, so the reward being, like, to flex your muscles, that actually is meaningful now because I will actually be making some progress. Memory foam pillows are interesting. They do not really go flat. Yeah, the problem with memory foam, whether it's pillows or mattresses, is that they retain a lot of heat. I would love to buy a new mattress this year. I don't know if that's going to happen, but partially the reason is that it is very warm. I have a memory foam pillow top for the mattress, which is mostly a spring mattress. And it's like, yeah, it's real warm. Noah. All tea drinkers at D&D, so we talk about tea quite a bit. Hell yeah. Manuka, New Zealand honey? So I don't know if this is true, but I've heard that eating honey from the place that you live is like, it helps manage your allergies. Interesting. Little facts. Okay, let me change the title of the stream. See, why do you do this? Whenever I first start the stream, it's like, excellent connection, bro. Excellent connection. But now it's like, the stream's current bitrate is lower than the recommended bitrate. Like, okay, I don't think I can change that mid-stream, but alright, thanks for fucking letting me know. Maybe I should... I don't even have any paper on my desk right now. I cleaned my desk recently, and now I don't have any scraps of paper to write shit on. Oh, I found a scrap of paper. Okay. Maybe fuck with the bitrate after the stream is over. Raise bitrate? Question mark? 6,000. kbps. Okay. We'll deal with that later. Anyhoozle. Ooh, Puggle says, I got a routine for my physiotherapy yesterday so I can start walking around soon. Yay, it's been almost 9 months and I've suffered atrophy. Hell yeah, I'm really excited to hear that you're getting back on your feet. Isn't Manuka Honey what Sam Cedar keeps advertising about? You'd have to tell me. I do not watch the, is Majority Report, right? Sam Cedar? I don't watch it. So, yeah, I was kind of thinking, like, you know, let's vamp for a little bit. Let's chill. Let's hang out. Let's talk about whatever's going on. And then we'll start with Dead Domain. Because I'm sure if it's a 2-hour long video, it's going to take us at least 3 hours to get through it. If we could watch it on slightly increased speed, we can always do that. So yeah, what's been going on with everybody this week? I'm trying to think what has gone on with me this week. Majority Report is really good if you want decent daily news. Hell yeah. I don't want I don't want daily news, I think is what it comes back to, but that's good to know. If I check out from like social media in a way that is successful, but I still need to be tapped in just enough to know what news is happening, I'll keep Sam Cedar in mind. Let's see. Oh, so you mentioned kombucha earlier, Drea. I am actually starting to try kombucha again. I got rid of my SCOBY before. I actually kind of fucked it up. So I just bought like a kombucha kit off of Amazon, and because you can't really get non-flavored kombucha at the store anywhere. Like anywhere you go, all of the booch is flavored with something. So if you want to start your own booch at home, you have to have an unflavored booch. And I went ahead and just bought like a starter culture, and I just started it yesterday, which I'm excited about. I got like a giant, dude, I have a giant fucking ball jar. It's so big. Like a full gallon ball jar is enormous. So I got that started yesterday, and I'm gonna actually follow some instructions this time, because a lot of the time before I was not following instructions. So like I brewed the tea way too strong, and I put like either too much or not enough sugar in there. I love kombucha. It's delicious. Truly a drink from the gods. I actually bought a kombucha not too long ago, and I was like, this is too sweet. This is it's not it's like not vinegary enough. I need the kombucha to be vinegary, or I'm like, ugh, gross. At the store, they have to do something to stand out. Do you really need to advertise that much to the kind of person who drinks booch? Like, see, look at how many people are leaving this conversation right now because nobody gives a shit about health food. Like, there's only 11 people in here. Hold on, I'm changing the title. What is wrong with her? Question mark. Hold on. Or like, let's say, what do we say? Trans grifter? Question mark. There we go. Go. Nobody fucking cares about health food. And like, frankly, some of the things, that I'm into, like, I get it. Nobody cares. Like, nobody cares about fitness except when you get to see big mommy muscles. That's the only time that y'all care about fitness. Surprisingly, a lot of you stick around when I'm talking about mental well-being, so I'll give you that. But yeah, nobody gives a fucking shit about like healthy gut biome or whatever. And also like kombucha is not really alcoholic. It's generally like maybe 0.5% alcohol. It is extremely like, it's only enough alcohol that they're kind of required to say that it has some in there, but it's like a completely minimal amount. It's more like a vinegar drink. Ooh, apple cider vinegar with the mother and garlic and honey as a shot tonic. Oh, that sounds crazy. Just popping over from Katie's stream. What's up, Mabs? I am sticking around regardless of the topic. Fair. Some of you are true fans. Actually, the only time I care about fitness is when I see fat, hairy dad bods. Thank you very much. All right, Baphomet, I stand corrected. The giant water bottle is back. It's been dirty and in storage since I moved. And now we're back. Gamers. Man, I didn't know that Katie streams at the same time as me. That's kind of fucking irritating. Oh, it just ended. Okay, well, I guess it's good timing then. I should tell her to send people to my stream if she's gonna be ending it, like, at the same time that I get on here on a regular basis. Carla CG says, let's go hiking. Oh, girl, you have no idea. I don't know if you're a girl, actually. Carla, I made an assumption. I just put, if you didn't see it before, I just put a spike ferrule on the end of my walking staff. So I am fucking ready to go hiking. It has a rubber end. And then you take off the rubber part, and it's a stabby spike for hiking. I think that I'm at a level of physical fitness where I could attempt like an easy hike. So I'm gonna probably try to do that soon. There's a lot of cool, beautiful places where I live now. Put that back where it goes. I do feel like a bit of a hypocrite after discovering I kind of like Irish hard cider. You know, you like what you like. It's cool. She's never consistent on when she ends her stream. Oh, okay, fair. I give to you, the people, the gift of consistency. I'm pretty fucking consistent considering how ADHD I am and considering just like comparing me to other streamers. You know, like, I guess like Vosh streams in the morning usually, but I don't know, like, and then like he also will stream just like when important shit is happening, like a debate or something. I feel like I'm one of the only streamers in the leftist space who has been consistent. Once I stick to once I like, some of them don't even set a schedule at all. And I'm like, okay, I have a schedule. And I try to, basically every time I'm like, here's a 4-hour stream. Occasionally it'll be like a little bit less. But we're really pretty fucking consistent. Hello, Mira. Had a super productive day. Awesome. Love to hear. What is the target of your very first PNW hike? What do you mean by that question? To be clear, I don't know much hiking language. So are you asking like what's the length of the hike that I want to do, or like where do I want to hike? Yeah, he's right behind me. Yeah. Consistency is great for us autistics. Yeah. I guess, you know, if I were to stream whenever I feel like it instead of on a schedule, I wouldn't stream very much. And that's been the case the whole time. Because, like, I think most of the time I'm not like, yeah, sounds like a great way to spend my evening, you know? And at least this way, my family can plan around it. I mean, where are you going? Yeah, no, I don't have a specific hike planned. I was basically just gonna, like, pick, a park that has a pretty nice, like, woodsy area in it. There's, like, a shit ton of parks in this area, and some of them have, like, short hiking trails. So I was thinking of basically just starting there, starting easy, since right now my cardio is basically, like, I have a little pretend recumbent bike. Like, it's not, like, fully the bike. It's just, I'm, like, looking at it right now because it's on the floor. It has, like, a frame and 2 pedals, but it's not motorized or anything. It's only powered by your legs. And then there's like a thing that you twist that tightens down, and that can increase the resistance. And it has a little magnetic reader thing where it keeps track of how many steps you've taken with it, basically. And that's the cardio that I'm doing right now. Oh, I guess I missed him talking about autism. Baphomet says, if I could beat Vosh up for any one of his awful takes over the years, it'd for sure be him basically saying, oh yeah, you can easily cure your own autism by simply not being retarded. I am sure that there was more words of what he actually said, but, you know, I haven't checked in a while any of what's going on with him, TBH. I kind of checked out. I mean, like, after he was bitching about the optics of still fucking paying attention to COVID. So, yeah, whatever. I'm just like, he's a streamer in the space, and the other streamer that came to mind was Demon Mama, but she doesn't stream anymore. So, and the other streamer that came to mind was Xander Hall, but I don't know what the fuck he does anymore because I don't pay attention anymore to what he does. Hike one of the 55% of American old-growth forests now up for logging under the new fascist regime. So actually, there was a successful court case. Now, I'm sure that it'll still keep getting appealed up, but so the Bureau of Land Management, the BLM, which that's federal land, and there's a decent amount of federally owned land in the state of Oregon, and they are targeting old-growth forests and saying like, oh, we want to log this or whatever, which is Also fucking stupid because if you know anything about like tree growth and strength, the trees here are actually not that great for lumber. Like there's a reason why we buy a lot of lumber from Canada, and it's because the trees grow slower in Canada, which makes the wood stronger, basically. Um, but there was a federal judge who basically like a couple of legal organizations here in the Pacific Northwest have tried to basically they sued the federal government and the Bureau of Land Management over this stated intention to cut down old growth forests. And this judge found that the plan that the BLM had made did not adequately take into account federal law stating that deep consideration has to be taken of the ecological impact that this will have. So they would come, their idea was they're going to come cut down all these trees, but like, how does that impact drinkable water in the state of Oregon? How does that impact our fire resistance in the state of Oregon? So yeah, what they're doing is illegal. The BLM plan to cut down all these old growth forests is illegal. And these organizations in Oregon are going to continue to fight back against this bullshit if they continue to appeal this further and further up in the courts. Like the BLM is not following federal law. And I hope, really what I hope for is that places like Oregon, Washington, California, like states with good, strong economies and progressive leaning governance, I really hope that we start finding our own ways and like maybe even increasing taxes. I know on the Oregon ballot, there is going to be a motion, or maybe they're voting on it in the legislation. I don't know, but there's a law being discussed that's like they're going to increase the tax on hotels. So out of staters are going to be the ones who pay this tax, and it's going to directly go toward conservation. So basically that kind of thing is what I want to see. Like I want to see these progressive states start divesting from the federal government. Federal should have zero ability to force logging on state land. Yeah, so what I'm saying is that there is a decent amount of federally owned land in Oregon that's managed by the Bureau of Land Management. It is federal land. So there isn't a situation where like the state of Oregon could say what you're doing is against Oregon state law. They're challenging it on the federal law. But I would love it if like, could we buy back some of that land? Can we like buy back some of the federal land, or like can we fund our own miniature version of the NOAA so that we still have accurate weather predictions? Like I really do want to see that kind of thing happening more, where we just start to go, okay, well, if the federal government is not going to provide the same services, then these states with good, strong economies can just kind of create jobs by creating independent agencies, essentially. San Diego went all out on hotel taxes. Conventions are going somewhere else. Yeah, well, this is only like a 1% increase that's being talked about in Oregon. I'm not sure if it's like a ballot initiative or if it's legislation. Like, I don't know if the people can vote on it or if the state government is just voting on it. But basically, it's like, yeah, it's only going to increase the hospitality tax by like 1%. Yeah, what's up, Shakespeare? Yeah, come in for the trans grifter, stay for the tree talk. Yeah. Oh my gosh, I'm so thirsty. My throat is not this dry at the beginning of stream. It's very interesting. Mm. You know your boy is staying hydrated with, what is this? 32, wait, hold on. You know, this is a 64-ounce thing. Giant bottle of water. I'm not sure if playlists are allowed to be posted in the Discord. Like, what? Like, I don't, there's not really any rules about it. I guess. Florida is talking about redirecting tourism rental tax away from the tourism industry and send it to offset property tax. Tourism is the main industry here, so people are pissed. Well, yeah, at least tourism businesses are pissed. Totally. For a time, the Bureau of Land Management was the one federal enforcement I was fully for. In 2019, they traumatized me and 2 friends on federal land, being on your knees in the desert with guns trained on you while your friend is dying of a diabetic emergency. They saved us from the Dust Bowl. The need is real, but once again, the enforcement of law is abused. Yeah, that's wild. I had never really considered that that officers of the BLM would be like armed. I hadn't really considered that. I don't know a ton about the BLM because I don't want to work for them. Basically, I've been looking into potentially going into a field related to environmentalism, but obviously I would not try to work for the federal government right now because of the instability of that. So yeah, if I were to try to get a job, it would be either, I mean, like my ideal situation is having a state job. So it's still like the stability of government work while also doing what I love. But I don't know. It just seems like with private businesses, you just never know. Or even with like private nonprofits, it just feels like it would be less stable to me. But I have a meeting next week with a couple of professionals in environmental science who are going to kind of just, I guess, let me ask some questions about how to get into environmental science and like what kind of jobs are available and things. So I just know that the BLM controls a decent portion of land here. I actually don't know. I think I looked this up recently. About 25% of the total acreage of Oregon is managed by the BLM. So fully a quarter of the total acreage in the state of Oregon is federal land. That's crazy. That's so much. 16 million acres. What's the BLM? It's the Bureau of Land Management. Oh, isn't that lovely? Someone posted a hateful message in the YouTube chat and they were patient enough to wait 1 full minute between subscribing and saying something hateful and stupid. Bye, Phil. Love you. Hey, Byron. Why does federal own any land at all? That is an interesting question. I would have to like research into the history of how all this works. I'm sure that you could make a post hoc argument that there is a like a distribution of, I tried to say Bureau of Land Management like several times before I started saying BLM for short. Sorry, everybody. I was also initially confused when I was reading about BLM. I was like, what do you mean Black Lives Matter? And like, oh, the Bureau of Land Management. It's a federal organization that manages the land. But yeah, if like 25% of the land in Oregon is public land managed by the state of Oregon and half of it is managed by the federal government, you could make the argument that like that's a distribution of responsibility. But I would obviously personally be more comfortable. I mean, I don't know. You could also say like, all right, let's just imagine that the state of Oklahoma, I don't know the facts on this. Let's imagine that the state of Oklahoma has a lot of federally owned land, right? And if you had a progressive president, then the role of the progressive president would be to protect that federal land from the interests of conservatives who tend to be more, who gives a fuck about the environment kind of thing. So you could say that like some amount of federal management can protect land from sort of the whimsies of state government. But we're running into the opposite situation where I'm like, I think the state of Oregon does a good job of managing all of the things that it manages. And I would be more comfortable having state ownership over a lot of this public land. I also didn't think that BLM would be armed like that. We went to them for help. I just thought that they helped people and enforced public land ordinances and laws. Well, I mean, I guess that's where enforcement comes from. Like, if they don't have guns, then how are they going to enforce the law? Kind of question. Later, Buffy. The BLM, if I recall properly, was established in response to the Dust Bowl due to the unregulated farming and development of wide swaths of prairie created leading to famine causing wind and soil events. Oh yeah. That's a good point. When was BLM founded? Or why was BLM founded? Not Black Lives Matter. Bureau. Okay, I'm just gonna have to say Bureau of Land Management. Bureau. Whoa. Land Management. I can't type today, I learned. The BLM was formally established in 1946, but its roots go back to the years after America's independence when the young nation expanded. At first, these lands were used to encourage homesteading, westward migration, and economic benefits to the national treasury and citizens. Looking at the Bureau of Land Management about page here. The General Land Office was created in 1812 to support these national goals. Over time, values and attitudes regarding public lands shifted, and at the urging of President Truman, Congress merged the GLO and another agency, the U.S. Grazing Service, to create the BLM. Today, the BLM administers more surface land and more subsurface mineral estate than any other U.S. government agency. The BLM's mission, which is principally defined in the Federal Land Policy and Management Act of 1976, directs the agency to carry out a dual mandate, that of managing public land for multiple uses while conserving natural, historical, and cultural resources. In the language of the FLPMA, the BLM is to administer public lands resources on the basis of multiple use and sustained yield. So the GLO, the General Land Office, was created in 1812. When was the Dust Bowl? That was way earlier, wasn't it? Oh, no, it was later. The Dust Bowl was in the 1930s, which I do know a decent amount about the Dust Bowl because I'm from fucking Kansas. But yeah, you would farm too much, and the kind of farming practices that they were doing would just like churn up the top layers of soil, and not having like the prairies have deep roots. Like, if you've ever seen how tall the grass can get in a prairie, it's taller than you. And then the roots go down at least that far, which holds moisture in the soil, and it holds the soil together. If you remove all that prairie plant and you start irrigating and like churning up the soil every year, you fuck everything up, basically. And there's not very many trees in Kansas, Midwest area, Great Plains, so the fucking wind will just come through and pick up all that soil, throw it everywhere, Dust Bowl, boom. That's how you end up with like an economic disaster like the Dust Bowl. So yeah, the Bureau of Land Management was officially created in 1946. I guess that is after the Dust Bowl, but I don't know if it was as a direct result of the Dust Bowl or if it was just like, you know, let's step up the way that we manage this land a little bit. That's cool, though. Yeah, Dust Bowls are only for chinchillas. Silly. Yeah, grazing, that one is a big deal for what they do on public land. Salinity and erosion problems due to farming and clearing sounds the same world round. Yeah, you gotta be fucking careful with the way that you do land management.
Now,
Jordan, I'm not ready for you yet. Yeah, I personally am obviously on the side of like being responsible stewards of the earth and like of the land. So yeah, you can farm, but don't farm like so much that it fucks everything up, which seems to be something that we're keen to do a lot of the time. Lots of corn, lots of cattle, lots of deforesting. It all just destroys the soil and it blows or washes away. You know, it's kind of funny too because I think someone else said it a few weeks ago that there aren't very many leftists who talk specifically about climate stuff or like land management or conservation or any of this kind of like environmental stuff. And that is kind of a neat niche that I guess I could slip into. You have other creators who talk about trans stuff. You can go to Erin in the Morning's website and see the latest news. You can follow people on Blue Sky who are talking about this, but I don't really see many leftists talking about environmentalism. And it's something that I am interested in, at the very minimum, passionate about, certainly. What's up, Ember? Water and soil conservation is a niche interest that should be a universal concern. No shit. Yeah, totally. Yeah. Like, this is something that, like, when we talk about saving the environment and stuff, like, I know for me, I can't speak for anyone else, but I know for me that this is not the first thing I think about. Like, I hadn't really given a lot of thought or consideration to how much work and how much different kinds of work are done to try to protect our environment from those kind of changes that can happen from policy decisions or from unchecked capitalism that, like, we talk on a regular basis. It's kind of a normal thing in the leftist community. Like, oh, fucking these 3 companies are responsible for a huge percentage of the total carbon output every year, but we don't really talk about, like, how to practically fight against that. I think that we just kind of make this assumption, like, the only way to fight back against oil companies is to, like, engage in violent action. Or, like, engage in individual action. I think that's another way that we tend to think about this. We're like, I am personally trying to use less plastic, or I am personally not going to eat meat anymore, as an example. But there are collective actions that we could take that would protect the environment. Like, there are collective actions. Like, you can volunteer, or you could get a seasonal job, or whatever. Like, even just following newsletters and being aware of things so that hey, there's a vote coming up, or like, there's an event happening and I could protest it, or I could go to the town hall and speak in favor of this bill that would go toward, like, let's say, funding these things. And, like, if you live, like, where I live, or probably in a lot of different places, Native American tribes are one of the groups that you have to, like, collaborate with. And it's, like, multiple different agencies, multiple different nonprofits, all working together, all doing slightly different things that are like, okay, we can't necessarily stop these emissions. We cannot necessarily stop these companies from destroying the environment, but we can protect our local communities. We can slow the things that are happening. We can predict, hey, this is going to happen in 10 years, so let's start doing something now to try to beat that in 10 years. If you know that a whole bunch of this certain species of tree are going to die because they don't tolerate drought very well, then plant a different native tree that does tolerate drought, and then you don't have to deal with, like, massive loss of, like, stability in the soil and environment by those trees dying later. Yeah, true. The conservatives that don't like to conserve anything. Fucking true, Darren. Yeah, these people clear every tree along the creeks to get a tiny bit more grazing space. They then lose the banks because of it and screw themselves. Yeah, riparian restoration is incredibly important. It's just, like, literally preserving the waterways, which is one of those things that you probably don't think about until you start fucking learning about environmentalism, that, like, yeah, whether there are trees and plants on the bank of a waterway can, like, change whether there is water there. Yeah, so fun facts. Or unionize. Well, true. Yeah, you can do that. How's the spring up in Bigfoot land? I love spring. I used to be a fall girly, you know? And now I think I like the spring better. It's beautiful outside. It's so fucking green. And there's so many different shades of green. And there are birds everywhere, which, like, you're cute, but stay away from me. There's squirrels. It is supposed to be, like, really, really warm soon, though. And I'm kind of, like, worried about that a little bit because it does tend to get pretty warm in my house already. Like, it's supposed to be getting up into the upper 70s and 80s soon, which I'm not psyched about. Mm. The environment is a difficult concept to fully comprehend. Water and soil conservation breaks it down to an exact need that is understood everywhere you go in the world. Totally. Totally. Wait till July. Listen, the problem is that I'm already worried, and it's not even May. I know that it's going to be bad in July. I'm concerned that I might have to stream way earlier in the day or way later in the day because I can't run a loud fucking AC window unit while I'm streaming. I think tomorrow might be pretty warm, so I guess we'll get a little bit of a test drive of it on Takis to see what we can do. But Jesus, yeah, I'm like not excited about it being hot. It's already in the low to mid 80s in Florida. God bless America. Yeah, definitely time to make sure you have proper fans. Yeah, I'm by fall you'll definitely want to stream earlier. Yeah, and I'm, you know, I'm considering also like getting a fucking part-time job this summer and like actually working a job. So I would be streaming less or maybe later in the evening or something. I wouldn't mind a loud ass AC unit. I have something like an AC unit right now. I could turn it on for you and let you see what it sounds like. It's really, really irritating. I'm so tired of honeybee propaganda. Native bees pollinate far more and are evolved to pollinate unique and rare flora. Down with honeybees, support native bee colonies. Yo, bumblebees are the best. I can't really tell the difference between them, but anytime I see a bee, I'm like, yes. Fuck yeah. Yeah. Honeybees or any kind of bees, I'm like, yes. Especially, I do love the big fat bees that bump into things. They're the cutest little guys. At least it can still rain in June in the PNW. Fair, yeah. And I've heard people say that it's not very humid here. So, like, which makes no sense to me because of how fucking rainy it is all the time. But if it's less humid here than it was back in Kansas, like, hold on. Is Portland less humid than Kansas City? Well, the AI overview says Portland is generally less humid than Kansas City. Which means that it could be less bad. Because the problem is humidity and wet bulb temperatures, where if the humidity is high, then the temperature you can tolerate gets lower. Portland can be fairly dry in the summertime. How could it be drier in PNW than Kansas? I mean, if you consider how many fires there are up here, it gets fucking dry in the summer. And like, it's kind of paradoxical. We have like, it might be the Douglas fir, but one of the common trees around here, or it might be an oak tree, actually, one of the oaks here. But there are trees here that really, really like their feet to be wet in the winter. But if their feet are wet in the summer, they will suffer. Like they are evolved to be super dry in the summer and really wet in the winter because that's what it's like here. And the entire eastern state of Oregon and the entire eastern state of Washington, they're basically deserts. Like they're super dry, they're super warm, they're very arid. So yeah, like it does get pretty dry here. We have fires and shit. Yeah, we traditionally have two seasons, the rainy and dry seasons, totally. Yeah, you love to see the bees doing their thing. Hello, kitty. There are filters you can set up to remove background noise that are tuned to your specific background noise. Um, yeah, we might try it out. I don't know. Yeah, the little arrow makes things green. I'm surprised I'd never heard the term wet bulb temperature until I was an adult, considering where I grew up. Yeah, aren't you from Louisiana? I don't know why. I mean, maybe it's just like something that we weren't paying attention to as kids, or it might be like the kind of environmental language that has only become more common as more places have like wet bulb temperatures, which like wet bulb means it's so humid outside that your body sweating is no longer cooling you off, right? Like, so how your body works is you sweat and the air touches your skin and it helps you like take heat away, which is also why if you're hiking and it's cold, you want to make sure that you change your socks or air out your sweat from your coat, the inner layers, because it will wick body heat away from you to be wet. So but if the humidity is high, then like there is no cooling effect from the air on your skin. So that's kind of like what wet bulb temperature means. Which is why like people will say stuff like, "Oh, the dry heat in Arizona feels good compared to the wet heat in somewhere like Kansas or Louisiana or fucking Florida." Oh, Puggle's got jokes. Puggle's got some jokes. Uh, why are hippos so good at hiding in trees? Because no one has ever found one. How do you get down from a tree? You don't come down, or you don't. You don't. Down comes from. Oh, you don't. Down comes from ducks and geese. Okay. You don't get down from a tree because down comes from ducks and geese. That's a funny one. What has bark and fur but doesn't need a pat? A fir tree. Good stuff. And how do you tell the difference between dogwood trees? By the bark. That's my favorite one. I like the bark one. That's my favorite. Isn't Florida like entirely underwater? Some of it just isn't. It just isn't in its liquid form. Yeah. That's funny. Like most of Florida is underwater in the sense that the humidity is like 100% in the air. Yeah, wet bulb temperatures didn't happen as often until recently. In Arizona, we have monsoons, which are usually about 2 or 3 hours of storm, followed by just hot as fuck, humid, and unsweatable feeling. Do not miss AZ. Totally. The gorge likes to burn down every so often. You missed the fire that burned down half of it because some kids decided to throw lit fireworks into the bone dry brush. Dude, I genuinely think that should be like 10 years in prison. Like, there needs to be like severe consequences for shit like that. Oh, that's a good point. Mira points out that the dry heat can be a problem because the sweat evaporates very quickly and then you dehydrate super easy. Oh, that's a good point. Good point. One of the issues why we're seeing so much bee colony collapse is because we've introduced so many European honeybees while um, exercising anti-native bee lawn, park, and miscellaneous. Like raking leaves is bad for them, clearing fallen litter for bonfires. Yeah, that's an area of environmentalism that is really overlooked. Um, which like I don't know how much I would personally want to invest in that as a field, but it is a good concept to keep in mind that like we get so focused on beavers, trying to restore the beaver population because they make the dams and that fucking keeps the land wet, blah blah blah. Whatever, beavers are good. Also otters. There was a species of otter that was like basically hunted to death, probably for its fur, here on the West Coast, and they're trying to reintroduce this otter because it also has a large impact on the environment because they eat a lot of the clams and mussels, which, if you know anything about this part of the world, there's a shit ton of clams and mussels and they're fucking everywhere. And you're encouraged to eat them. So we focus on like cute animals, or maybe we also focus on salmon. Like, you know, we want to bring back the salmon population, but we really don't have as much, probably as many individuals working in it or as much money and funding going to the conservation of certain insects that are also pivotal to the functioning of an ecosystem because of their, you know, whatever. Maybe they kill and eat a certain kind of beetle that attacks the trees, which then makes the trees like burn down more easily, and like kills them off. Or maybe we have like, you know, bee populations that are collapsing and they are pollinators. Even some wasps are like important pollinators. One beaver said, "The river is flooding, the banks are breached." And the other said, "Damn it." These are good. They eat the sea urchins as well, and the urchins off of the kelp fields. Yeah, like the otters really help the kelp fields because the things that like to eat kelp, they eat those things. The kids who started the fire got a little bit of community service, and I think their parents got a slap on the wrist. Dude, seriously, genuinely, earnestly, minimum 1 year in prison. Like, you need to fucking learn that lesson. I was going to tell a joke about sodium, but then I thought, nah, yeah, that's good. Yeah, of course, industrial agriculture and the use of pesticides are going to be the greatest impact globally. We as individuals don't have as great an impact, but we still do and can improve our immediate environment by being an awesome steward. Right. And like, that's another thing where like you can vote on things like making certain pesticides illegal. And there are tons of local farms, at least in Oregon, where, so like, okay, go to the farmer's market. If you want to encourage good farming practices, then when possible, buy local. Because those local farmers give a shit about what happens to their immediate environment in a way that industrial farmers don't. I'm a prison abolitionist except for those teenagers. True. Okay, well, I really, really enjoyed this conversation, but I would like to look at this video about Brianna Wu and see what it's about. We're going to listen at 1.5 speed. The kids who lit the fire were underage, so their defense was they weren't old enough to be responsible. Meanwhile, the parents' lawyers pointed out they were not the ones who lit the fire, so they also should not be responsible. So yeah, supposedly nobody was responsible for the gorge spontaneously bursting into flames. I would freak out. Yeah, no, you're still pissed about it. I'm pissed about it hearing about it right now. That's fucking bullshit. Yeah, we try teenagers as adults all the fucking time. Because of the otter's ability to use tools, they are the only mammal that can eat a sea urchin besides humans. I also love that otters can have favorite rocks, and they will keep them in little folds of their skin. Very crafty. True. Oh, I know the video's long. Earlier, I was watching it before stream, and I went to pause it to go do something, and I was like, oh my fucking god, I've already been watching this for 1 hour and 13 minutes. Yeah, this video is called The Lies of Brianna Wu, and I figure, I just want to watch at least some of it with you and kind of react to it. Brianna Wu has had me blocked on Twitter for a while. I can't remember what I said to her that made her block me. And then she got on Blue Sky, and I immediately blocked her because I thought it was funny that she was the most blocked account on the entire website. Very funny stuff. So, yeah, I can't remember what I said to her that made her block me. Fun. babies
I always
laugh.
used to tell her, Venus, you take too many chances. You're too wild with people in the street.
This is one of the final scenes of Jenny Livingston's classic 1990 documentary, Paris is Burning, which explored the underground culture of New York drag scenes and the people in it. The woman here is Venus Extravaganza.
This is depressing AF, by the way. Just right out the gate, it's quite depressing. If you don't know about Paris is Burning already, then you're about to learn cursed knowledge.
Trans woman and performer and aspiring model who had also taken to sex work in the hopes of paying for gender reassignment surgery. In the film, she recounts narrowly escaping a violent encounter with a man who discovered she was trans on a date. During the filming of Paris is Burning, Venus was found murdered. Her body was found on Christmas Day, and she had been strangled just a few days earlier in the Duchess Hotel. To this day, her killer has never been found. I bring this up because Venus's story, despite taking place 3 decades ago, is eerily prescient. Anybody in the trans and wider LGBTQ community likely knows someone who has been sexually assaulted, physically assaulted for their identity, or even just who had to turn to sex work to make money, a precarious pursuit that endangers many trans people today. Now, what does this have to do with Brianna Wu? On January 3rd, 2025, Brianna Wu tweeted a response to someone calling out a post where she decried—
It's a documentary, thought it was fictional. The Paris is Burning? Yeah, no, it's a documentary about, and like the woman died while they were filming, or like right after they finished filming. Like the woman that is one of the, there's several, I guess, sex workers that they focus on in it, but one of the women who they focus on like dies during the filming of it, during the making of the documentary. She seems like a uniquely fascinating trans grifter. I've seen this before from trans folk who come from well-off wealth and family support, then they come into the community and create oppression for themselves rather than weaponize their own privilege. Yeah, totally. It kind of reminds me of, I can't remember her name. The woman who is in Congress right now. She's kind of similar, like from a well-off background, whatever. I remember Brianna announcing her intent to bring her sagely wisdom to the blue sky peasants. Takes talent to be as unlikable as she is. Yeah, she's kind of always been like a really abrasive, and we're gonna go into that here.
Pride progressivism as the reason for trans people's—
Oh yeah, dude. Brianna straight up says, many trans women go into sex work because a lot of us have autogynephilia, and being objectified is erotic for us. I'm like, I want to throw up, ma'am.
Current political woes. Her response was, many trans women go into sex work because we have autogynephilia, and being objectified is erotic for us. And the first thing I thought of when I saw this post was Venus. I thought about all of my friends who had been turned away from jobs because they were trans, who had been forced into sex work by circumstance or other people who had survived only on it, and who had been stripped of their dignity because sacrificing that dignity was the only way they could sometimes eat the 1 or 2 meals they got a week. And I bring up this decades-old documentary not just because it's personally resonant, but because it shows how long this kind of thing has been an accepted part of queer and trans life. Exploitation isn't new for people who know and maintain community with other trans people. This reply, like most things Brianna says about trans people with such authority, is not based in fact or even really in her personal experiences. Unless you want to say she finds the idea of being objectified personally titillating, which is certainly a valid reading of what she says here.
Yeah, exactly. Her telling on herself. Exactly. Paris is Burning is a required watch for trans performers. It is not cursed, it is beautiful. This is our history. Yes, our beauty is rife with sadness, but our joy and passion to express is unstoppable. I should put Paris is Burning on the list. I am thinking about, like, let's just fucking turn this into a casual channel. On the streams, we can talk about whatever, but on the actual channel, I think I'm just going to talk about trans movies. Just, like, at least for now, to see if we can make this tolerable. Oop, knocking shit over.
I don't think that's what she's getting at, but it would tie into a very common theme in Brianna's work, which is a consistent fetishization and reduction of what it means to be a woman, something we will examine later. Brianna likes to play at being an authoritative voice for the trans movement. In the last few years especially, she has turned away from progressivism and has attempted to engage right-wing and even far-right voices, courting TERFs, all in the name of being a reasonable voice for the trans community. Something nobody asked her to do, but she's still taking it upon herself. Now, I want to be open and say that because I had so many questions from my time looking at Brianna's history, I did attempt to reach out to Brianna multiple times through multiple avenues to sit down and have an interview. She had blocked me on multiple websites, and I'll be honest, that is completely fair, considering some of the not very nice things I've said about her. Mostly at the time, those were reactions to what I saw as her abdicating the responsibility to help other trans people instead of her throwing other identities like non-binary.
Just acknowledging, like, yes, I've said mean things about her.
People like myself under the bus. So I can't blame her for not being open to discussion. I maintain that I earnestly did want to hear her take on most of the things I discuss in this video, and if she watches it and wants to sit down and have a convo and set the record straight, my DMs are open to you, Brianna. That being said, she did respond to some other folks who asked for an interview in my stead by labeling me a weirdo degenerate. Again, no hard feelings, Brianna. I don't like you either.
Yeah, I called them a weirdo degenerate. That's how Brianna talks about other trans people.
And I don't want to be your friend. but I also at least try to be a little fair in my assessment of people, and just because I don't like somebody doesn't mean I don't want to pick them honestly, which is why I found it somewhat annoying that she would say this within a few hours of platforming just dickheads like Lior Sapir.
Oh, what did she say? Hold on. Okay, she says, as part of my political project to give normal, non-degenerate trans women a voice, I have an announcement. If you're a weird sex freak claiming to be a trans woman who announces your freaky sex life constantly on social media and you come after me, I will not pull punches. I have no fucks to give. You people have spoken over us for far too long, and we should have said how embarrassing you are ages ago. I think that this was, I think that this might have been directed at Zinnia Jones, but honestly, it might have been directed at just like several people, like any kind of trans person that Brianna doesn't agree with. And you know what's interesting is what we're going to find out in this video is that Brianna is also a weird fucking freak in public. She just thinks that her version of being a freak in public is fucking normal, which is crazy. Yeah. Shout out, to Dead Domain for such a strong establishing moment for how out of touch this woman is.
Lior Sapir or Richard Hanania. See, she placates these figures by essentially saying they're right that some trans people are evil and are grooming kids, but not all trans people, not the transes like Brianna. And as I'll show, this is just the latest in a long line of what sure look like shifting grifts for Brianna Wu. During her time in the spotlight, she has had many titles, from congressional candidate to game developer to artist, question mark citation needed, and at every step of her journey she has managed to claw her way to slightly more relevancy, leaving a long list of enemies in her wake. I'm not going to sugarcoat my words. I want to be as clear as possible why I took on this project. If there's a thesis to this video, it's this. From everything I've found, from all the information available to me, and that I've heard from first-hand sources, Brianna Wu is a volatile liar and a fraud, and should have no future in any kind of political analysis or creative endeavor, let alone representing any group of people. Because there are so many concurrent themes running in her story, this video will kind of be all over the place by necessity. There's no way to talk about the totality of Brianna's various controversies without jumping between them to show the decades-long patterns of her behavior, but I promise, it's all leading to the overall point. Brianna Wu should never be taken seriously by anyone.
Cool. Yeah, how in the world has Brianna been allowed to fail to the top of any public career line? My guess is tons of money from birth. Yes, that is correct. She basically, like, her parents have bankrolled her, and then she married a man with a decent amount of money, and that's kind of part of why she is the way she is, I think.
I haven't just trawled through old forums and found some dirt. I've spoken with several anonymous sources that knew her, interacted with her directly, and even worked with or under her. None of them had very nice things to say, by the way. In fact, most people I've talked to who worked with Brianna don't seem to. Brianna Wu is not a genuine person. I know this because I've seen how she acts in private, where she often plays the role of a mean girl, talking shit about others, often over their appearances or their optics rather than any kind of principled stances. Even the people she will publicly claim to ally herself with, like Destiny, aren't safe from her insulting them when she thinks nobody else is watching. Another example is the time she speculated about Shoe on Head being the victim of assault. Or, as I'll show later, how she has often attempted to hire people to create dossiers on who she deems her political...
I've never even heard of her. Yeah, it might be like an age thing to some extent, because like I became familiar with Brianna Wu during Gamergate. So if you weren't like active on these spheres on the internet in like 2014, it may be that you just missed her. That was like when she became relevant, and that's pretty much the only thing that people think about her on, except that now she's being a very public trans mean girl. Like that's the other thing that she is now known for. But most people will probably be familiar with her from Gamergate.
Enemies. But this is going to be a long video, so stash that one away for later. And I have evidence for everything I'm saying, by the way. She seems to only care about optics, not right or wrong, which is probably why her opinions have shifted over time as she makes her broad pivot to being a dollar store Blair White. Additionally, I've had several people share their DMs with me from Brianna and stories of how she's attempted to bully them and force them into stepping into line, particularly in recent years as she's taken it upon herself to represent that reasonable trans population. Some of these I will also share later in the video. These are just some of Brianna's
recommend, if you're interested, to go yourself and watch this video and look at all the screenshots, because I know that not only does Jordan not put them on the screen for very long, but also we are watching it on 1.5 speed. So I would recommend, if you really want the details, to go watch it and like pause and read everything. Thank you, Puggles, for another $2 Australian. I appreciate that. Thank you.
duplicitous facets that will pop up throughout what can loosely be called a career. Like I said, it's going to be all over the place, and as a result, this video will be filled with more callbacks than a Marvel Phase 5 writer's room. She is incredibly thin-skinned, talks authoritatively about things she has very little or no knowledge of, blatantly lies about her experience and credentials, and lashes out at anyone who might challenge her. People have spent the last 3 years or so asking why she's so suddenly pivoted to the right. But the reality is, this is who Brianna has always been. While my other deep dive investigative pieces have spent ample time disproving the conspiracies and lies spread by people like Matt Walsh or Synthetic Man, I have far less of that to do here. That's not to say Brianna isn't a liar. She is, and I'll be debunking some of her talking points accordingly. But the real evidence of who Brianna is isn't in her worldview. In fact, I'd say it's the opposite. Brianna Wu constantly shows just who she is by her lack of any ideology aside from being a desperate, attention-seeking grifter.
That's fucking so just laser-targeted criticism. I genuinely appreciate how much work Dead Domain puts into these things, and I think, you know, everybody should hit the like button on this video. It's called The Lies of Brianna Wu. It's very easy for you to find.
The first thing to know about Brianna Wu is that she never had much to worry about in life. When she was 19, she went to Millsaps College, only to drop out to found an animation company that, like her college endeavors, was funded by her parents to, as we would attest later, the tune of over $200,000. The animation studio was known as Socially Unconscious Productions, and we will talk about it more in a little bit when we discuss Brianna's art and how she's lied about that over time. These aren't just random assertions, by the way. Much of this Wu has talked about in her various interviews with the media, from an interview piece on Inc.com in 2015. Quote, "At Ole Miss, Wu studied journalism and wrote for the Daily Mississippian, but she never graduated. She left school the first time to start her own video animation company, came back, and dropped out for good in 2001 after getting swept up in the excitement surrounding George W. Bush's election as president. Her parents were big donors, and they got her a ticket to an inauguration ball. That led to a stint working in Washington, long enough to become disillusioned with Republican politics, as well as dangerously dependent on Ambien, a sleep aid. Her parents, in the final act of support, brought her home to Hattiesburg and paid for a bed at Pine Grove, where Tiger Woods would later be treated for sex addiction." End quote. She's also publicly posted pre-transition pictures that confirm her identity as the person we're about to hear stories on. Now, I don't really care if someone ambles through college to find their direction in life. I did it, plenty of people do, regardless of economic bracket. I'm also not interested.
I only found out about Brianna Wu when she invited the Transpositions team to come on Dollcast and get crapped on. Steph filled me in on her backstory. Really? What was she wanting to talk to you guys about? Because, yeah, she has a podcast called Dollcast where she's like, she basically does the mean girl thing, but on a podcast. Yeah.
In talking about Wu's time in rehab. The reason I included the full paragraph was to talk about her lifelong links to Republican electoral politics, because that is going to come up later. The real problem is that despite
her horrible art,
graduating, many interviews in the future would regard her as a graduate from Ole Miss, even her own website claiming she graduated from there. But there isn't really much of a record of her actually finishing that degree. And on her LinkedIn account, for example, it says she attended from 2003 to 2008 and majored in journalism and political science. Her LinkedIn bio currently reads, quote, "Brianna Wu is a software engineer, entrepreneur, and outspoken advocate for women's rights. One of the most prominent women in technology, Brianna founded her first $250,000 startup at 19. In running for US Congress, Brianna is working to bring a new generation of voices and values to Washington." And already you can see some of the aspects of Brianna that would become recurring themes in her story, namely depicting herself as far more qualified than she actually is, saying she's a startup founder at 19 without mentioning that said startup was shuttered and had nothing to show for the effort. Also pursuing journalism and political science, something to note moving forward, as she shows a shocking amount of acumen for either of them. Brianna likes to talk about her time in college as a reporter, and there are articles written under her name before she transitioned to verify this. She worked at the school newspaper covering school newspaper things, but according to later forum posts, she would depict this as being on a crime beat. Maybe she did cover crimes at some point. I wasn't able to find any articles.
On a crime beat for the student newspaper. So, like, the first part of this video is honestly just, like, a lot of it is just showing that, like, Brianna Wu just, like, has lied about her lots of things. She's lied about lots of things. I didn't see the invitation. She sent it to Bumblebee. I got the impression she wanted to talk about the direction trans advocacy should take in the lead up to the election. Yeah, that's kind of been one of the things that she's been talking about. I mean, like, I don't know how much Jordan is going to get into this, like, maybe later in the video. Oh yeah, she does talk about the Dollcast later in the video. And yeah, but this is like Brianna's new thing, is she is talking about the optics of trans activism and like the optics of, you know, oh, all of you people arguing in this way are the reason why things are bad now. It's just super victim blamey, basically, you know, that I think the right wing, like, mostly what we have had in the public popular sphere has been, but like basically normie trans representation. You know, we have like Laverne Cox, who's a beautiful woman. She's very respectable. She speaks very respectably, and she's whatever. She's an advocate. She's an actress, all this. And that was kind of like, she was the sort of example of a trans woman when we were kind of starting to see some of these increasing steps toward trans acceptance like 10 or 15 years ago. Like that kind of person. I feel like the complaints that Brianna Wu has about trans activism, you can only really have that opinion by being a terminally online person. Because the mainstream discourse around trans people, like, we don't really talk about our weird sex fetishes on like a mainstream platform. There aren't really like mainstream sex scandals or anything involving trans people. So it really does seem like the kind of thing you would only bitch about if you spend all fucking day on Twitter, which I believe that Brianna does. Like, I believe that that is the problem, that she bitches about. She thinks this, like, oh my God, sexual deviancy in the trans community is being mainstreamed because I see a lot of individuals on Twitter doing survival sex work, right? It's fucking really stupid. So
to back that up.
Look, Mark, you know this. Like, you just showed that heartbreaking TikTok at the video at the beginning of this. So that 3-year-old girl on the ground, that breaks my heart. I got my start in journalism, like covering police successes in Mississippi, which is very racialized.
Brianna had always been interested in being an artist and tried to get a comic she was writing into the local paper. And according to some forum gossip, when she was denied, she blew up at the teacher and person who ran the newspaper, calling them both slurs, namely calling the teacher a sand N-word. Now, I want to tread very carefully here because there's very little to go on for verifying this incident, but I do think this kind of meltdown, taking offense over her artistic ability, and the fact that she did work for the newspaper are all entirely compatible with Brianna's trans behavior sense and line up with the timeline of her career, particularly the anti-Arab slur.
this is like some deep investigative journalism shit.
While she might not be slinging such harsh language anymore, she's still blatantly racist towards Palestinian people. The first time I met her, I was the opinion editor at the Daily Mississippian, and I turned to see this creepy fuck standing behind me. I shook her hand, and she pulled away, saying, "Ow." She then explained she'd broken her wrist in a bicycle accident that had almost killed her and given her amnesia. She explained that she wanted to be a columnist, and she had previously worked for George W. Bush in the White House, but she had since realized how R-slur and evil all conservatives were. About this time, my phone started ringing, and I politely ignored it while I talked to this girl. Then it rang again and again until I answered. It was the managing editor, who had ducked behind the front desk and was whispering, "Stay calm and don't react to this, but this girl isn't supposed to be here. She has a restraining order. Get rid of her." By this point, I was concerned that this girl might knife me at any moment, so I told her to write 3 columns, and that I'd evaluate them and get back to her on whether she could write for me. Parenthetical, I'm still proud of my ability to remain poised and convincingly pretend that the Daily Mississippian had any fucking standards. Turns out, a year prior, she'd come in wanting the Daily Mississippian to run a comic strip she had been doing. When she was told they weren't interested, she flipped out. She called one of the workers a fat dyke, and when Dr. Husney came to her defense, she called him a raghead and sand N-word.
And like, this is the quality of the art here. Like, this is the Brianna Wu art. Based on like the dead name is connected to the current name, and like, you know, Jordan has done the due diligence on this, and you'll see the similarity in art style to stuff that Brianna Wu puts her actual name on more recently.
Keep her away from Farley, but when they moved to Bishop, it no longer applied, and she was actually able to weasel back into working for the SMC. Here, we see several pieces of corroborating evidence with Brianna's own stories later. Things that are incredibly specific, like working with the Republican Party, which, again, Brianna would admit to in later interviews. So with these pieces of the puzzle, I feel pretty comfortable saying this did happen, and before transition, Brianna did go on a homophobic and racist rant. And right now you might say, well, that's not a lot of evidence. And you're right, I'm taking a little bit of this on faith, but having spent as much time as I have now studying Brianna, I can say this absolutely falls within the realm of her regular behavior and how she continues to act even today. So by the end of this video, I think you'll probably agree with me on this one. And plus, you'll be shocked to learn this kind of outburst and homophobia would come back later in her life. Additionally, there are pieces of art from her time in college when she was crafting this comic strip called Election Eve that, while made under her dead name, the same name cited in the forum gossip, is in the same style.
Dead Domain is going to go into this a little bit more in detail, but keep in mind what I said earlier, where, you know, Brianna Wu bitches about how openly degenerate other trans people are, and this is the art that she draws. And she will defend. You will see in this video her defending her choices to do this kind of art style, even in her more modern work that she's done. Like, some of this is like looking at her old college art, but this is how she depicts women. This is Brianna Wu's fetish. This is Brianna Wu's autogynephilia fetish that we're going to see more of throughout this video.
And even share similar designs with Revolution 60, Brianna's eventual sole video game creative credit. particularly the characters Holiday and Minuet, who are recurring through much of Brianna's creative work. These comics and the artistic similarities further cement Brianna as the same person mentioned in the forum posts. Mind you, these posts were idle gossip years before Brianna became any kind of notable political or game industry figure. Socially Unconscious and Election Eve aren't really notable except for how poorly they were received, with the flat jokes often depicting offensive stereotypes and not making much sense, at least according to the mail-in section of the college newspaper.
What's up, Mosh?
Thanks to Andrea James at Transgender Map for help with these sources, by the way. And speaking of her brief comic strip writer stint, I can't really talk about this era of Brianna without acknowledging her probably made-up girlfriend, Lauren Malovey, in 2001. During her time with Socially Unconscious, Brianna, then pre-transition, was writing her comic Election Eve, with Malovey apparently the primary artist. Now, the art style is already pretty distinctive and similar to Brianna's own, so keep that in mind. Malovey never posted a picture of herself, but blog posts exist on the Socially Unconscious website claiming she and Brianna were partners and in love. Curiously, there are posts.
So this is the fake girlfriend. I maybe was talking over it a second ago, but Brianna Wu invented a pretend girlfriend during this time. Very Peter Coffin move.
Under Malovey's name, like product reviews circa 2004. The way it's written is notably similar to Brianna's own assertive and casually abrasive style, and internet sleuths would later discover the only address from anyone named Lauren Malovey matched the same house as a pre-transition Brianna. Malovey is, as it turns out, also a Bond girl's last name, Cara Malovey from the 1987 film The Living Daylights. You'll notice that Brianna is a big fan of spy fiction, and you can see it in her art of women with all the updos and the go-go boots and bright, garish, skin-tight suits.
Yep.
It's like Austin Powers' Silent Hill. Then there's the evidence
It's like
via
Austin Powers' Silent Hill. God damn it, Jordan. You're so funny.
Socially Unconscious's own website that Brianna publicly advertised looking for female models, citing Lauren being camera shy. Perhaps most damning is that after Socially Conscious Productions was shut down, Lauren Malovey seems to have almost entirely disappeared, which, as we would soon see, coincided with Brianna's transition. Now, I don't like speculating at what I can't prove, but as a trans person, I think this feels familiar to how a lot of people might try exploring their own gender behind the anonymity of the internet. I honestly don't care if Brianna made up an entire internet girlfriend to explore ideas around femininity and gender expression, which is kind of what—
Oh yeah, 2 of you have said you don't know her, she goes to another school. It really is.
It looks like happened here. Everyone's done internet cringe when they were younger, nobody was exploited and nobody was hurt by this, so I don't really care. And you might ask yourself, then why bring this up, especially when there's only anecdotal evidence to go on? Isn't it possible this Lauren Malovey just so happened to live at the same place, write similarly, draw similarly, and act similarly to Brianna, and then disappeared before Brianna transitioned? Come on. It is technically possible that there is someone named Lauren Malovey out there, but what makes Lauren notable, however, is how it's not the only time there would be compelling evidence that Brianna Wu would craft an identity or person on the internet to support her. So like most things in Brianna's story, we're going to come back to this later. Going back to the animation studio startup, Wu was given money from her parents to start. You may have noticed I mentioned she went to Millsaps and then referred to her going to Ole Miss. That's not an accident because she was at Millsaps before Ole Miss, and it's here she would put out her first comics. A lot of stories from Brianna's time in college are hard to verify, not just because she hadn't transitioned yet, but because she constantly either lies or omits details about this time in her life publicly, despite some details leaking through in various interviews. And after internet weirdos on Kiwi Farms and 4chan began targeting her during Gamergate, she's gone to extensive lengths to try and bury certain aspects of her past, such as the aforementioned racist outburst. But one thing is for certain, she came from a rich-ass conservative family who helped her through every difficulty in her early life, from rehab to funding her own startup when she was 19 years old. From a story titled, quote, "Don't Mess with Brianna Wu," posted to Fiction Mania in 2006, she also mentions being able to finish laser hair removal just 6 months into her transition, something that is prohibitively expensive for many trans women even today. I don't need to even speculate that growing up rich affected Brianna because she's been open about it, saying in 2014 that her millionaire parents affected her upbringing and outlook on the world. She was given $200,000 to start an animation studio that eventually dissolved before producing any kind—
Dude, I can't— Listen, $200,000? $200,000. I think I would immediately take like at least 100,000 of that and put it into some kind of like investment that will grow over the next 5 years or something. Like, oh my God, can you imagine what you would do with $200,000? Like the fact that families like Brianna's exist and they still exist, and like that even $1,000 would be like life-changing to some trans people for at least a couple months, you know? Yeah, exactly. A small loan.
kind of product. If the aforementioned ad for a
But
model
not
that poses
alone.
Lauren Malovey is any
Like a gift. $250,000. What's up, Angelica?
indication, the studio's ambitions were to turn Election Eve into a movie, and were apparently working on a sequel novel before there was anything even released, aside from the comic strip itself. The level of exuberant, blind, naive ambition would become another commonality in Brianna's saga. But that doesn't mean that Brianna didn't have something to show for her time in art, animation, and college. She has a long history of art with a, let's say, distinctive style. Now, I don't want to specifically make fun of anybody's art here. Art isn't easy, but I do find several things about Brianna's art interesting, particularly how she draws and very explicitly fetishizes women's bodies.
Yep.
And by interesting, I mean, it's like I can tell a lot about a person and how she sees the world from it. Like that Jake Gyllenhaal character in the one movie he did with Wolverine. You know the one. Much of her art depicts busty, rail-thin, leggy women,
I don't
often
know
in
what
skin
she's
tight or
referencing
very
there,
little to
what
no
they're
clothing.
referencing.
This is another trend in her work over the last 20 years. There's very little variation in the body types of women, or for that matter, the style in which they are written. Almost all of her characters are generically headstrong women, independent badasses who feel rooted in an outdated brand of Obama-era girl boss feminism.
True.
Again, aesthetically, there are a lot of overlaps we can see with Brianna's inspirations, like pulpy spy fiction, specific anime and manga, Final Fantasy, and more. And yes, of course, we have to talk
Yeah,
about
boob bones. True.
the MLK Terminator with the KKK Ninja Girls. There's just no other way to describe it.
Hold on.
Spy fiction, specific anime and manga, Final Fantasy, and more. And yes, of course, we have to talk about the MLK Terminator with the KKK Ninja Girls.
MLK Terminator with the KKK Ninja Girls. Prepare to have your mind blown.
There's just no other way to describe it. This piece was apparently the cover for Crossed Genres and was accompanied by this blurb from her husband Frank Wu in 2000.
So hold on, no. Chill, we want to look at this art for a second. So that is Martin Luther King Jr. as a Terminator. And these are KKK Ninja Girls. You can see the symbol on the hat. Like, this is what she chose to do. And of course, all of these women are exactly the same body type. As Jordan just said, no variation in the body types of these women. This is crazy. This is kind of unhinged, really.
In 2009. Quote, Brianna went to University of Mississippi, where a famous race riot took place. Thus, the building is the Lyceum, where you can still see the bullet holes in the columns. As one of the lone liberals on campus, Bree wanted to do her own commentary on it. So,
as one of the lone liberals on campus, when we know that she, like, worked for George Bush in this kind of similar time of her life.
King with a rocket, but it's okay because he's a Terminator. And we also see KKK members, but they're all sexy ninja girls in skimpy white outfits. And now that MLK is free at last from his fleshy shell, he's going to kick their butts. 60s girls in go-go boots and jetpacks fight alongside. Remember when I said she lacked political instincts, despite apparently studying political science? I'd like to present to the court Exhibit A. If I thought Brianna had any real understanding of political struggle, let alone MLK and his ideas around reactionary politics, intersectional movements, or really anything about civil rights, I'd say it would be disrespectful to slather the imagery of the civil rights movement in her knockoff manga pinup fetish art style. But I don't want to give her that credit for understanding those things to begin with. As seen in even more recent tweets, her understanding of racism, let alone civil rights struggles, are constantly shown to be thin at best and virtually non-existent at worst. Now, we will talk more about Brianna's artistic output when we get to Revolution 60 and her stab at game development, but having touched on her various artistic exploits, I feel a need to examine Brianna's constant character self-inserts. These depictions of women aren't just something that she fetishizes, but it's also how she, I believe, to at least some extent, sees herself. Normally, I think calling things self-inserts is hack-level internet criticism. When it's leveled at game developers, it's almost always not true. For example, incidental passing similarities are bound to happen in art as an extension of the creator's inspirations and personality. But in Brianna's case, there's a lot of evidence that the characters she makes aren't just representations of her interests, but how she sees herself going through the world. Remember when I talked at the beginning about how Brianna says trans women enjoy being objectified? When I first heard that, it immediately felt out of touch with the reality of survival sex work, but the more I've learned about Brianna, the more it makes sense. She doesn't consider the perspective of others, but she does fetishize femininity herself. And it's not just femininity, but a specific brand of headstrong anime protagonist coolness. I have no other way to describe it, honestly.
Yeah,
as an example, here's an article she would write during Gamergate. Just listen to how she describes herself and pay attention to the fixation she has on sports motorcycles, a recurring motif for many of the scantily clad women in her art. This section is a little long, but bear with me because this bit, written by Brianna herself, is such a valuable—
Nega Brianna! Me when I'm very serious. Me when I'm a very serious person.
Insight with how she sees herself and goes through the world, and more importantly, how that just changes depending on her whims. Quote, I'm late for a programming meeting with Maria. I don't have time to be stuck in Boston traffic. So instead of grabbing my car keys, I don black, skin-tight leather armor and leap onto my motorcycle. It's a 2009 Honda in racing red, something straight out of Akira.
I don't think anybody who actually rides motorcycles describes it as armor, but okay.
I've leaned into highway turns at 80 miles an hour feeling nothing but speed, the air whipping all around me, and my thighs gripping a 212-degree engine for dear life. My emotional connection to this 410 pounds of fuel and metal is intense. Idling at a red light, I see a woman waiting to cross. She has my figure and looks to be my age. The frazzled look of motherhood is about her, disheveled hair and perpetual distraction. She's hunched over to hold the hands of two kids so beautiful that my heart gives an involuntary lurch, an instinct hardwired into my brain in ways I don't understand. It hits me hard as if this is an alternate reality version of myself crossing the street. A Brianna that had made drastically different choices. The woman notices me. Look at the girl on the motorcycle, she says to her children. Our eyes meet. I recognize my gray-blue shade in her eyes. I was adopted and had planned to do the same, but recently I've changed my mind. I wonder for the billionth time if the right decision is to concentrate on my job. I'm certain that if I had children, I would be failing at my job. I've hit my 30s, a period when it seems all of my friends suddenly have kids. That's a priority shift completely incompatible with goals. Startups require you to give it all or go home, routinely requiring long nights, longer weekends, and blood and toil. If you aren't willing to put in the hours, eager replacements are standing behind you. If I fail, the women I work with will all be out of their jobs. The light turns red, I release the clutch and twist the throttle, and my doppelganger and her children disappear in my wake. End quote. So we can pretty clearly see that anime influences seeping into Brianna's perception of herself and the real world around her. Her long-running fixation with sport motorcycles apparently tying into it, but don't miss out the vaguely fetishized
actual campaign ad for her congressional run.
Description of her in skin-tight leather wrapping her thighs around an engine with an intense connection to the fuel and metal. This isn't written tongue-in-cheek, by the way. This is meant to be a somber reflection of a place and time in her life as a woman. I don't think this ever happened, by the way. I think it's another example of Brianna sensationalizing her life, something we are going to see much.
So I want to be clear that when Brianna wrote that story, she wrote it and presented it as like a thing that happened. She presented it like a thing that actually happened in her life. But as Jordan has just said, I agree. Like, I don't think that that's a real thing that happened. I think that that's one of those everybody clapped moments where she's like, I saw myself reflected in this mother, and her children looked at me and were like, oh my God, she's so cool. And I rode away so fucking badass and sexy. Yeah, like, yeah. And like oh my God, I'm sorry about this screenshot. It's very distracting. It's still on my screen, by the way. It's just not for you. And like she does, it is like sexualized, like, I'm wearing skin-tight leather and my thighs are gripping the motorcycle. It's like, okay, girl. I do think that Brianna Wu thinks she's hot, which is interesting at the very minimum. Okay.
More of. She likes to craft this kind of elaborate narrative about something passively happening to her that also just coincidentally works to sum up whatever grand argument she's trying to make in whatever piece she's writing. And yet it's so ephemeral that there's no way to verify it actually happened. She just be saying shit sometimes. If you're familiar with Brianna's modern positions on being trans and trans rights, this also might seem at odds with what she says here. Nowadays, Brianna will go out of her way to say some dumb shit like, trans women are just boys that need hormones or we will break. And these arguments of hers are an effort to court favor with TERFs and broadly anti-trans or gender-critical commentators, mostly conservative. She now argues against trans people, quote, invading women's spaces, and argues in favor of essentially seeing trans women as fetishistic men, promoting no shortage of ideas that provably put queer people and trans people in danger. And she does all of this unironically, despite the fact that, as you can see here, she spent several years, over a decade in fact, depicting herself as a biological woman and using that pretense to position herself as a voice on women's issues.
She totally did do that, by the way. Like, I know back during Gamergate, there was like speculation that Brianna Wu was trans, but she wouldn't acknowledge it. Like, she basically just pretended to be a cisgender woman for a long time, which is, yeah. So for her to be like, oh my God, these trans women invading women's spaces, it's like, it's insane because she actually did pretend to be a cis woman for fucking a decade. I've seen how she talks about people she doesn't like and can't help but see that ugliness, even if I think she would otherwise look fine. I mean, it's not polite, but I think she's kind of an ugly woman. Like, you know, it's like fine for you to be ugly. Like, I don't, like, obviously there's plenty of ugly people in the world and I don't shit talk them for the most part, for being ugly, like, obviously. But if you're gonna be like, I'm a hot bitch, like, I'm the desirable type of trans woman, it's like, you are way less attractive and desirable than a lot of these trans people who you are calling degenerates. Like, it's the hypocrisy of it that makes it a point worthy of acknowledging. It's like, when you're portraying yourself as, you know, all these self-insert characters of like her, you know, tight waist and the big hips and gallivanting about saying you're a biological woman for all these years and now coming out and being like, I'm the right kind of trans woman. It's like, yeah, you are not as hot as you think you are. And it's like her being wealthy in that it fucks up her brain and her ability to function as a human being. Like, thinking that you're hot shit and that you're the most desirable kind of trans woman and that everybody should be like you, which is how she acts. Like, you haven't even earned that like entitlement by being hot, you know? I don't know.
I think I pass reasonably well, but when I go to the gym, I shower at home just because if someone can tell I'm trans, I don't want to upset them. I think women deserve the right to say, no, we don't feel comfortable with you in our space. So I would say to my sisters out there, I understand that it can be dehumanizing the way that we're treated sometimes. The way that TERFs talk to us is it's brutal. It is cruel. It is so mean, but we will get so much further with getting goodwill from the public, with humility and grace and trying to get people to buy in and for them to see our humanity than we will by forcing them.
In pieces like this and myriad Gamergate interviews and articles she would write, she never discussed her status as a trans woman, only depicting herself as someone who's always been a biological woman. Could this be because at each point in time, depicting herself a certain way was, at least in her mind, guaranteed to get her maybe a little bit more attention? For example, depicting herself as a cis woman during the perils of Gamergate, and now coming forward as a trans woman to lend credibility to her political arguments against other trans people. I'll let you decide as we dig more into Brianna.
Yeah, it's when she was still not publicly saying that she was trans, but she was shit-talking trans people all the time, it looked really fucking bad. So she kind of had to start saying that she's trans publicly in order to continue making the kind of criticisms that she was making without just coming across like a transphobic cis person. Instead, she is a transphobic trans person.
Specifically, her long history of opportunism. But I'm getting ahead of myself. We have a lot more to talk about before we get to Brianna's time in Gamergate and the events that would give her the bigger spotlight she has always been chasing. Also notable for Brianna pre-Gamergate was her time spent on Susan's Place, where she was a moderator. I had no idea what this place even was before sifting through Brianna's past, but apparently it was a notorious forum that caters primarily to an incredibly outdated view of trans people, in particular medicalizing transness and trans identities as a disorder. Based on this archived post, Brianna was apparently banned from the forum in 2007 after some kind of incident that was deemed unbecoming a moderator, and it appears the forum manager even said, quote, I had hoped to allow her to leave with whatever dignity she could, but apparently that isn't going to be allowed to happen. Though I couldn't tell what incident had occurred here. So, much like stories of her in college, we can see Brianna has a history of being abrasive and confrontational to anyone who even peacefully speaks out against her. It's actually kind of funny, half of Brianna's past wouldn't be identifiable as being her if it wasn't for the way she very specifically reacts to other people and criticism. We will see much more of this abrasive, commanding tone in the future, so by the end of this video, you'll definitely recognize her distinctive style of online interaction, which is to basically act like an authority figure on any given subject and belittle anyone who might challenge her, regardless of her actually being qualified in what she's saying, because most of the time she's not. There's also evidence on this forum of Brianna talking about trapping cis men as a trans woman and having sex with them without them knowing she's trans. This is obviously vile and dangerous, but I bring it up not to shame Brianna, but to throw.
She says, I would imagine that I would tell someone I was planning to marry, but that is it. Which, like, okay, so my position is that I feel like if you have had, like, a bunch of surgery and stuff and you seem like a cis person, then someone you're hooking up with probably doesn't need to know that you're trans. Like, obviously, whatever, like, some people might take issue with that. I know people who have had sex with people who did not know that they were trans. And, like, it doesn't seem to make that big of a difference in a casual hookup. Obviously, like, if you're trying to establish trust with someone beyond just a hookup, then yeah, you should have that conversation, like, sooner in the relationship. But I feel like people should have the right to be stealth and not have to divulge their medical history to fuck someone that they met at a bar, if that makes sense. Yeah, money has a way of rotting people's brains, totally.
Throw another piece of evidence on the pot.
Oh, and so the problem with her saying this, though, is that, like, if you're gonna bitch about other trans people, and, like, their sexual deviancy and them, you know, being duplicitous or forcing their way into women's spaces, like, you are a person who has fucked men without telling them that you're trans. So, like, it's stones and glass houses kind of thing here.
That she fetishizes transness, almost seeing femininity as a sexual descriptor first and foremost. When you realize this about Brianna, you understand a bit more why she so easily agrees with the Disprovian Blanchardian bullshit about autogynephilia, because she really does see herself that way. So she just reflexively thinks other trans women and trans people aren't really trans, if they don't, but more on that later. Also, during her time on Susan's Place, she spoke often about how Christians were evil and oppressive, an understandable opinion because at the time she had likely been cut off from her family and was by this point, I think, living with her husband, Frank Wu. It's also worth bringing up the time she talked about—
she actually did get cut off by her family? Oh, interesting.
Having no sympathy for any detrans people. There are several other commonalities between Brianna in 2007 and her attitudes now. For example, her insistence on using the word transsexual other than transgender, which might just be a time she was in type of thing. I also want to take a little detour to go talk about her live journal entries from around these times, which also detail her, I'm going to say, frankly, fucking unhinged ideas on politics. Just Listen to this shit. Quote, let me preface this blog by saying that I think gay rights are the preeminent moral issue of our time, the modern equivalent of slavery. It's one of the top 3 issues I vote on, and I fully intend to go demonstrate in Denver's Gay Pride Parade in 2 weeks. It bothers me deeply that 1/10 of America's population are treated like second-class citizens. That said, I think it's an error to see women's issues and gay issues as synonymous. I don't especially feel that gays are allies when it comes to women. I think we usually get along well, but I've occasionally felt that gays see us primarily as competition for the penis. Okay, no, serious. Okay. When I watch drag queens, I can't help but feel insulted, as if that offensive cartoon is what they think feminine truth is. There are so many issues.
Also, she is here positioning drag queens as being equivalent to gay men, when I think we all know that drag is a way for people to explore their gender identity. So a lot of people who do drag are trans in some shape or form.
Women have that gay men never have to think about are increased healthcare costs, equal pay issues, access to reproductive healthcare, and the threat of rape and violence. Concordantly, there are many gay issues that don't affect me. I've never had to worry that society didn't approve of my sexuality or marriage rights. Lots to unpack here. As I mentioned, we see her already depicting herself as a cis woman, not a trans woman. She's concocted this bizarre framework where gay men resent women as competition for penis, and then proceeds to say drag is a offensive cartoon that gay men think feminine truth is. That despite her actually making literal cartoon representations of how she saw femininity. Even in the previously mentioned 2006 Fiction Mania post where she recounts her first 6 months of transition, she essentializes femininity to what she saw as feminine traits she had pre-transition, like making food for an ungrateful partner, or defining profanity in speech as a masculine trait. Quote, generally speaking, girls are nicer and much
She doesn't like cussing. Cussing is too masculine. Wow.
more cooperative. I find myself obsessed with the importance of always being nice to people, even people I disrespect. Part of female communication is coming to consensus rather than being dominant. This comes second nature with estrogen. Also, estrogen makes you live in your own world. I sometimes find myself oblivious to my immediate surroundings, concentrating on something as insignificant as a hair on my desk. Estrogen also makes me more reticent to say what I'm thinking because I understand more deeply how important it is to get along. And later in that same Fiction Mania post, quote, and although I might dismiss it, being a girl is a lot of fun. Makeup, nails, fashion, and exercise were all things I took to easily. It's fun to wear skirts and have long hair, but it's also important to remember that's not what being a woman is about. It's also about
Very weird for her to position exercise as a feminine thing to do. I just think that this woman's brain is fascinating. That's kind of the big, I think that's kind of the big takeaway that we have here, is that this woman is a fascinating case study of what happens when you grow up too comfortable, I think.
About the standards you hold yourself to. It's about your capacity to be weak when it would be easier to be strong. What the fuck are you talking about? What the fuck, Brianna? Remember the MLK art and what I said, how she doesn't understand intersectionality and political organizations and movements? This is a lot like that in a lot of overlapping Venn diagrams of who is affected by what in different ways. She just seemingly wants her own little well-defined circle to claim as her own, regardless of if it pushes anybody else out. This is something she currently loves to do with non-binary folks and basically anyone she doesn't see as really trans. Again, this is a lot. We got a long ways to go. So it's safe to say, as far back as even the mid-aughts, Brianna was regarded as odd, abrasive, and even weird to and about other trans and queer people. Now, I don't want to say Brianna still thinks this reductively about gender because, in fairness, that was 20 years ago, but I bring it up because I think it colors in some of the shade she approaches gender and identity in for later. On Susan's place, we can, for example, go back and see her being real shitty about other trans people, essentially saying she doesn't want to hang out with other trans people because why would you hang out with trans women if you see yourself as a woman? Which is amazingly stupid logic, because if you see yourself as a trans woman, you shouldn't have a problem hanging out with any kind of women, you fucking dork. Even in places where she should be seeking community and understanding. Like with other trans or gay people, she seems to have no interest in anything but setting herself apart. I wonder if that'll come back. It will. It will. But what I find most interesting here is how similar some of these ideas are to Brianna's current turf-friendly turn. It's no surprise, right, that she would still be an abrasive, selfish person who doesn't consider the lives and existences of others. But that's not the part I find interesting. What I find interesting is how she would change her opinions in the coming years, being broadly supportive of a wider queer community. Like this Reddit post where she still claims to support non-binary people and calls them transgender. So either she changed her opinions between her early transition and then changed them back again, or she was simply...
Yeah, because she broadly says that non-binary people are not trans. Like, she's super hateful about non-binary people now. Nothing in this video is as gratifying as referring to her as a fucking dork. True! I cracked up earlier. I was like...
aligning herself with what was then broadly progressive positions at the time. That time being when she was in the spotlight for Gamergate, and then her political aspirations right after that. I mean, what are the odds she would change her opinions and or how she depicts herself multiple times in ways that would very specifically give her more support? But this was in 2015, slightly after Gamergate, so I won't get too far ahead of myself. Let's jump right into Brianna and Gamergate.
Hell yeah. The internet never forgets. This is when I entered, this is when she entered the scene for me. This is when I first knew about her. That's her husband.
Hey there, Kickstarters. I'm four-time Hugo Award winner, Frank Wu. For the last 3 years, we've been working on the video game Revolution 60, and here to tell you more is anime legend Amanda Wynn Lee.
What's the exfiltration plan? If we're quiet, I think we can sneak past them.
With Revolution 60, the story is yours to tell.
In 2007, Brianna met Frank Wu, who would marry her. In 2009, she'd claimed she had a grad degree she didn't have. In 2010, her fairly wealthy husband would then fund Brianna's endeavor in gaming, releasing a game in 2014 called Revolution 60. So, let's talk about Revolution 60. Brianna's sole gaming credit might feel familiar if you remember the art I showed off earlier in the video, and that's because several of the characters are straight up recycled from Election Eve and her other art, Holiday and Minuet being chief among them. Now, apparently, if you can believe such a thing, Brianna wasn't very fun to work with, as noted by this former employee of Brianna's studio, Giant Space Cat, ending the thread with the observation that Frank was the only one seen at the game's convention booth because Brianna was too busy with interviews. She's also been called out on social media before by other workers, and when I reached out to former development teammates to see if they had anything to say, no one responded except for one who simply said, "I don't talk about Brianna anymore. Good luck." Now, Revolution 60 was a iOS release in 2014
damning.
with a Steam release slated that was delayed by 2 years to September 2016. These delays would result in some Kickstarter and Patreon backers being unsatisfied when the game did release and was still basically the same, and not very good, at least judging by the user scores on Steam. It's harder to go by the game's few professional reviews because there's evidence that either Brianna or her husband Frank Wu had close personal relationships and friendships with several
Ethics in games journalism. No, Gamergate was right all along.
journalists who reviewed the game. Now, regardless of any possible positive reviews, the game's overall reception would be middling at best, and most of the user reviews skewed negative on both iOS and the Steam release. Because Brianna was a target of Gamergate, it's hard to say how much of the game's criticism is legitimate, or just angry trolling, but by and large, it seems like the early reviews of the game on iOS praise the game's ambition, but overall range from middling to negative, a sentiment shared by Steam reviews citing game-breaking bugs and technical issues. If there's one thing this game is remembered for, it's probably the art style, which is a 3D adaptation of Wu's comics years earlier in that it is almost entirely a cast of spindly, doll-like women. Notably, several character designs, like the one featured in this poster, would be eventually changed, and in interviews, Brianna would cite feedback from other women specifically for shifting her character design ethos, which may explain the changes. Again, it sure seems like Brianna's definition of strong femininity is like fetish gear.
These are... So on the left is a character from Soul Calibur 5, and on the right is your character from Revolution 60.
Absolutely.
And you know, to the superficial observer, these might look the same.
They might. I think it's all about intent. You know, I created these character models myself, and well, at least I did the design. But you know, so the difference is like Vanessa and Holiday both have very skin-tight outfits. But the difference to me is when I played Piano 3, I saw someone I could imagine myself as. Yeah. She's cool. She's badass. She's prolific. Yeah. She's awesome. Yeah. And the difference is all about empowerment and intent.
Within a few weeks of release, Revolution 60 didn't reach further than the top 1,000 downloads.
I want to imagine myself as a fucking stick figure with an hourglass shape who is also generic personality badass. I don't need no man. Thank you, Puggles, for another 2 Australian units. I've never really heard anything negative about her husband, and I hope he's actually a stand-up guy who is oblivious to what his wife is doing. True. Yeah, he seems like a well-meaning guy. Doesn't all women run around in public in tiny bikini bottom? True. Okay, Puggles, let me add that to the amount here.
For iPhone, despite being a free download that included the demo and a purchase that unlocked the rest of the full game. Now again, this video isn't about examining Brianna's creative work and tearing it apart. Aside from examining commonalities between this and her early work that support conclusions like the fabrication of Lauren Malovey, I don't really care to examine much in Revolution 60. It seems like a garish, uncoordinated genre blend that lines up with all of Brianna's previous work, blending her distinct influences in a way that never feels original or unique. But I do think it is telling that despite spending more than 4 years developing the game and several hundred thousands of estimated dollars, primarily funded by her husband Frank Wu, Revolution 60 was the end result. While Giant Space Cat as a studio did ship a product, the sheer amount of time...
we blew all of our money on this. That's what happens when you have too much money and not enough children. Puggles, so many super stickers. Thank you. Just so everybody knows, if you're interested in donating to me, yes, please, this is my job. We don't normally do shit like this where I review someone else's video. But donations directly to my website, I get more of the money from that. So thank you.
Time and money expended echoed Brianna's first startup at 19 that wasted similarly exorbitant funds on her creative endeavors. Add to this little things in the game's design that just make me scratch my head, like all the female characters using the same character model, like all the characters apparently having 10,000 polys, which would be hysterically unoptimized for iOS at the time, and probably contributed to the numerous technical issues. Much of the soundtrack are royalty-free songs, tons of the assets.
Yeah, and also this is supposed to be an iPhone game. This is a lot for an iPhone to handle, I feel.
Apparently just from Unreal asset packs and more. Again, most of this was found years ago by Internet Sleuth, so thank them for their work so I don't have to play this thing. Okay, but so what? She put out a middling game, maybe she wasn't a very good boss, and pissed off Kickstarter backers. Well, it's because like everything else Brianna does, no matter how unsuccessful, her time as a game developer didn't dissuade her from seeking a spotlight, using what she would sell as her expertise in the industry to spark conversations about being a woman in said industry. which was the real start of Brianna Wu's story. For most people in the media sphere, the first time they heard about Wu was during Gamergate. And bear with me because there's so much random internet drama I've had to sort through with various factions, backstabs, inconsistencies, and perspectives. I've done my best to source and cite everything I say, like I always do. And having said that, I think it's safe to say Brianna Wu was the biggest opportunist on any side of Gamergate. Now, I don't have time to regurgitate the full timeline of everything and everyone associated, but for those who don't remember, Gamergate was a hate campaign leveled at Zoe Quinn and Anita Sarkeesian specifically. These two, and several others throughout the gaming industry, were targeted for various reasons, ranging from being vocal proponents of basic feminist theory about female game characters being too sexualized in the male gaze from Anita, to Zoe's controversy around a review for their game that kicked off the whole thing. If you want a truly in-depth and incisive look at the controversy, I highly recommend my friend Savvy Writes Books video on the subject, as she goes incredibly deep through the controversy, step by step, in a way I just don't have time to do here. The broad strokes are, while some people tried to focus the movement on a nebulous idea of ethics and accountability in game journalism, for many people, Gamergate consisted of several harassment campaigns that made some women in the industry feel incredibly unsafe. And that was before Brianna Wu came into the picture. This article from The Guardian lays out some key points in the Gamergate timeline, such as bomb threats in March 2014 after an appearance by Anita Sarkeesian is announced, and the...
Yeah, I remember Anita, like, talking about having, like, she received a bomb threat, at I thought it was at a college. Maybe I'm misremembering it. Game Developers Choice Awards receive bomb threats. The aggressors say they will explode a bomb if the organizers go ahead with giving Anita Sarkeesian an award. She is given the award and the threat proves empty. Oh, maybe I'm crisscrossing this with something that happened to Rebecca Watson. But it's, you know, basically these women in a lot of cases were just expected to either bring their own security or cancel their talk. Like, the colleges and other institutions that were hosting them were not willing to provide additional security when these bomb threats were being made. Like, I think that was Anita. It was either Anita or Rebecca. And it was similar timeline, similar kind of thing, where Rebecca Watson was under criticism for calling out anti-feminism within the atheist community, whereas Anita Sarkeesian was she was under fire for critiquing the gaming community.
August 16th, 2014 blog post that alleges Zoe Quinn slept with someone at Kotaku for a positive review. And then just seemingly out of nowhere, after months of harassment concentrated on these two women, Brianna is mentioned on October 9th. You see, it's hard to talk about how Brianna fits into the picture between Anita and Zoe because she kind of doesn't. When Zoe and Anita were getting death threats and harassment, Brianna wasn't a well-known industry personality.
I didn't even know this, but basically Brianna, like, butts herself into the conversation about Gamergate. She pokes the bear and makes herself a victim.
By any stretch. Despite what she'd say later about being one of the foremost women in tech, nobody really knew who she was. She was working on an indie phone game with very few eyes on it that didn't look very good, sporting Brianna's trademark lack of style and failing to generate any wider interest upon release. Yet, as a woman in the game industry, she took it upon herself to taunt and mock the Gamergate dorks she saw as basement-dwelling losers. In fact, she spent a lot of time and effort trying to goad people into engaging with her online. I don't want to make it sound like she didn't get any harassment, by the way, but there's overwhelming evidence that Brianna continually went out of her way to poke and prod the Gamergate forums, which you can see in these tweets from October 10th, 2014. You can see from these tweets, she starts the mocking around 10:30 a.m., and by 4:30 p.m., she announces the same day that 8chan has doxed her, and proceeds to talk about fleeing her home with her husband for fear of violence, particularly pointing to threats not from 8chan, but from a Twitter account, Chatter Whiteman. 3 days later, Brianna had an interview on the front page of Cosmopolitan. Soon enough, the list of her interviews would encompass the Boston Globe, Verge, Polygon, Huffington Post, VentureBeat, Daily Mail, BuzzFeed, Six Axis, and like a dozen others, all focused on the narrative that this Gamergate harassment.
I feel like you know that she was reaching out for these interviews, that she was like, hey, this has been happening to me. Would you be interested in doing an interview with me? As opposed to, like, her being approached by these institutions.
Campaign had driven a game developer from her home. Now, this is anecdotal, but I spent hours Googling, gathering, and searching for interviews done by Anita.
Oh yeah, that is something that Jordan brings up in a minute. Viren says, a lot of her behavior is fucked up, but it is also striking that she still tries to ride this while Quinn and Sarkeesian don't want to be defined by it. Yeah, it is something that we do talk about. As much as I love Erica and Matt, one on the line, I'm staying with Lux till the end. Thank you, Puggles. And I'll be on Takis tomorrow. Yeah, it's unfortunate that there's... Well, I mean, when you stream damn near every fucking day of the week like the line does, you're going to end up... There's no way for me to, like, stream on a night that they don't, unless I just want to give up my Friday nights.
Brianna and Zoe during this time. When it was active in 2014 and the year or so following, with rare exceptions like an appearance on a talk show from Anita, almost all of Quinn and Sarkeesian's interviews came years after the harassment campaigns that were threatening them and their families' lives. Brianna wasn't like that. For as much hate as they received and were targeted for, they very obviously wanted to try and continue living their lives, and were hesitant to be cast as some kind of ideological leaders on the front lines of Gamergate, despite not being given much of a choice. Compare, for example, Anita being quoted as saying it's frustrating to be known as a survivor of Gamergate, and then Brianna continuing to wear it as a badge of honor, to this day proudly touting her facing down the internet hordes as an achievement.
Me,
I know
former
the
game
eyeshadow
developer,
was
and I
so
think
good.
most people know me from Gamergate. I remember during Gamergate, there was this expansionist thing that it wasn't enough to talk about the number of women we were hiring in the game industry. Now we had to obliterate whiteness as something that we were featuring in games. And I'm like, it's a little bit extreme, but we'll go along with it. So it was just one more step after another.
Also
I'm not
an
saying Brianna
insane
was
thing
never
for her
harassed
to
or
say.
sent death threats, but the speed with which she not only entered the conversation, but went from nobody knowing her name to apparently needing to flee her house for fear of her life, all the while she continued speaking up, is so wildly at odds with what you see from Zoe and Anita. That's just a fact.
I actually knew a woman who had to sell her house during this kerfuffle. She's not a super high profile woman, but she was being harassed and doxxed, and she sold her fucking house. Meanwhile, like, fucking Brianna Wu's doing all this shit.
Fact, you can take it however you want. Oh, and let's not forget the fact that she talks shit about them later in some DMs. We'll talk about that more when we get to the long list of enemies she's made.
The
This
long
is,
list of
however,
enemies
not at
she's
all
made.
at odds with Brianna's long-observed history of needing attention and shifting her aims and approaches to get that spotlight. This is another fact. Anita and Zoe, for whatever you might think about them, had their entire lives derailed by Gamergate. Brianna, however, suddenly got a platform, and I don't think it's a coincidence that this happened to be around the time she was still trying to get her eyes on her personal game project that floundered upon its initial iOS release. She seems to have used the opportunities afforded by the copious media appearances to not only drive home the idea that she was personally being persecuted and suffering from this movement, but also that independent and female game developers needed support, like she needed, for example, for the game that she was developing at the time, the game that nobody really cared about before she fled from her home. And the same game that would get reviews and press coverage from the same outlets that allowed Brianna to basically uncritically write whatever she wanted about Gamergate. The thing about Gamergate is, at the time, it neatly divided the industry into for or against. If you were perceived to have spoken out against harassment, you would be labeled an SJW cuck, and if you expressed any kind of apprehension about the overly flat criticism of people like Anita Sarkeesian, you would be easily lumped in with a bigoted hate mob doxing and attempting to ruin
Thank you for the membership, Puggles. It doesn't get added to the total for today's stream, but I do appreciate it. Thank you.
people's lives. When tensions run high, there's not a lot of room for nuance in these screaming matches between sides, despite the best efforts of plenty of people, and a number of commentators and internet historians have tried to approach the subject with that nuanced sense. It was the perfect environment for someone like Brianna to thrive in, where she could make whatever accusations she wanted, and when asked for proof, would simply accuse someone of being a Gamergater, like she did with notable not Gamergater David Packman during a kind of now infamous interview.
The reason I chose to show what was going on with me was because the industry had chosen to stay silent. And it was literally a choice for me to make my life put it more in danger and to talk about this openly in the hope that would force the industry to finally look in the mirror and address some of these things.
Well, let's unpack that, because that's interesting to me. When you talk about the industry has remained silent, can you be a little more specific in the sense that in spending quite a bit of time researching and preparing for this interview, it seemed without question that some of the threats you received through Twitter and publicized were reported ostensibly by those also claiming membership or allegiance to Gamergate. So are we really talking about the movement as the problem, or are we talking about a faction of those identifying with it as the problem? So
Okay, thank you for the gifted membership to Darth Gently. I will, I don't know actually what that translates out to. I'll just go ahead and add $10 because I think that that's close enough to what the memberships actually shake out to, even though it doesn't automatically add them to the total for today's stream. So let's say $26.32. With the donations today, I will take off my hoodie and flex my muscles, which are working out right now. Okay, I'm almost broke. Yeah, don't donate too much if you're almost broke. We don't want that.
the question about just this account, BROLOLZ, that's you, right? Is that a sock puppet account? Did you try to hide the fact that that was you? What's the story with that?
No. Oh my God, this is the most ridiculous thing on the entire planet. I'm very happy to address this.
On the entire planet.
So a tactic that Gamergate has done quite a bit with Not Your Shield is they've created fake accounts from, like, say, a black feminist woman, and they put it out there, and they try to portray themselves this way. I created an account that's similar to, there have been other parody accounts, and the idea was this was a frat bro that was very for feminism. And it is just a silly joke. In fact, to make it very clear that it wasn't a sock puppet, because I was worried about people thinking I was doing that, I announced it on my Twitter. I just completely said it on the account. It is nothing more than a joke. And
so it's a satirical account. You never meant it.
It's a satirical account. If you don't understand it's a joke, it's because Gamergate doesn't understand the examples involved. I have to tell you, I feel like this is kind of a hit piece that you're doing on me right now, to be honest.
Whoa. Let's talk about that. Hold on a second.
Well, in a moment. I want to answer your question first. I feel like you're really putting me on trial here.
No, by no means. By no means. I think that that's an unfair allegation.
Okay. To answer your question, he had some questions that were sent to me. I think it was about 20 to 30 of them. Some of them were ridiculously leading, just ridiculously leading. And I said to him, I think you're going to need to phrase these more neutrally, or I'm not going to be able to answer them. I also sent them to a friend of mine, Glenn Fleischman, who is a very
True, the media, they're very unfair to me, folks. Very unfair.
famous journalist, a very, very, very famous, well-regarded journalist, writes for The Economist. And he actually just laughed at the questions because he didn't find them ethical.
That's perfectly fair. Listen, last thing, let's address your allegation that this is a hit piece.
Sure.
The way that I take particular issue with, I have absolutely no horse in this race. When I announced I was going to be interviewing you, I received a deluge of emails saying the fact that I was interviewing you alone and not someone in opposition to you was evidence that I was in the tank for the other side. And of course, I think you would disagree with that. All I'm doing is I spent many hours researching, and I don't want to be accused of not asking you the questions that others believe should absolutely be asked. I've not cut you off. I've presented you with a fair opportunity to answer every single claim, and I hope to have someone on with an opposing view next week or the week after you, and they will be asked all of the same tough questions that you would want asked. So I take very significant issue with the allegation that this is in any way a hit piece. I have absolutely no preconceived notion of what right and wrong is on this particular issue. I'm open to hearing both sides, and I'm merely doing my job as a journalist.
Yeah. Sure. I would say, yeah, that's fine if you're going to monologue.
I'm sorry, if I'm going to monologue? Brianna, you're breaking up. I don't know if you have a good connection. We got cut off. All we heard before you got interrupted was if I want to monologue.
You just told me, you gave me a long monologue about why you don't feel that this was an aggressive hit piece. What I would say to you is this has been, you've asked me like one question to present my side, and then you've asked me some very, very aggressive questions, questioning my credibility, this and that. And I feel like most of what you've asked here has been very aggressive. I'm happy to answer that. I try to answer these as aggressively as possible, but I wish we could spend as much time talking about the issues at hand rather than the controversy that Gamergate is trying to, frankly, sling mud into my reputation over.
This kind of reaction from Brianna is another staple, even against Kickstarter backers and Patreon subs who would question her later. She simply
David Pakman looked like a teenager then. Yeah, I don't know. I have heard David Pakman before, but I didn't know. I guess I knew nothing about him. But yeah, he is very quite young at that time.
call them Gamergate supporters or abusers. I want to say that the divide between people from that time and the obvious agendas being pursued make digging into these topics incredibly difficult, because trying to find information on Brianna Wu or any of the other targets will bring up endless piles of assholes, referring to women as subhumans and SJWs. But on the less extreme fringes, there were still plenty of people who kept tabs on the inconsistencies in Brianna's story, which isn't easy because there are so many. Suffice to say, this video took a lot of digging. Like this Reddit thread where they note that they rarely saw people comment harassment on Brianna's Twitter despite her claiming. And that despite claiming to have fled her.
Can you back up a single thing you've asserted? Then how dare you question my credibility, you Gamergator? True. Yeah. And the crazy thing too is, like, you know, she doth protest too much with regards to the, like, oh, you question my credibility, because we've seen even just so far in this video that she lies about her credibility. So of course, if you call her credibility into question, she's going to get defensive because she has lied about being a college graduate. Jordan kind of blew past it earlier, but she did say, she was like giving us a timeline for when she married her husband. And like she in the mix just mentioned, like, or Jordan just mentioned, like, she lied about a grad degree that she didn't have. So it's like she's used to like making shit up about herself. And so, yeah, of course she would feel attacked if you suggest that maybe she is not a credible source. It reminds me of Josh Johnson's take on MAGA turning on Musk. Didn't know you felt that way, you South African. Yeah, I love that bit from Josh Johnson. He's great.
Her home, Brianna was very clearly doing interviews, or at least appearing to, from her home soon after having fled. But as we can see from some of these interviews, the image of someone being forced to flee from her home by Gamergate is a shocking and compelling one. That sensationalism is another aspect of Brianna's story that has remained steadfast. Yet, like her stories about college, having degrees, about being a crime reporter, doesn't really hold up to much scrutiny. For example, there are several consistency issues with the way she tells the story of her being forced to flee, most notably elements from the interviews and articles she wrote within days of the doxing being inconsistent with the way she would tell the same story months later, or some elements being seemingly missing, like the idea she had been getting harassment for months leading up to the tweets, eventually just being simplified to the tweets being the lone catalyst for the exodus. If you can feel the creeping sensation of something just being off about Brianna's story, don't worry, plenty of other people noticed, because even back then she'd be caught lying and attempting to bait harassment towards herself personally. like this infamous post from her Steamform account where she refers to herself in third person as a notable feminist and is very clearly trying to goad people into talking shit about her. Notable feminist, by the way, doing some real heavy lifting here. While forum posts and some articles did show Brianna's interest in progressive feminism and women's rights and representation issues, she wasn't particularly notable at this time for being a feminist, any more than she was notable ever for being an artist or a journalist.
True.
What am I saying? She still sells herself as all of these things, no matter how much she actually knows about any of this. I'm surprised at this point she doesn't call herself a chef because she made a TV dinner once and didn't burn the brownie. She likes to, let's say, stretch the truth, if that wasn't obvious by now. For example, like how she would depict threats against her life, even when the same threats had long been revealed to be jokes. After an obvious online troll, Jace Connors went on several tirades trying to challenge Brianna to a street race. Brianna continued to claim he was threatening her life. It would later be revealed that Jace was merely a troll character being played by comedian Jan Rinkowski as an elaborate absurdist bit. I'm not saying it's a good bit, this all seems very stupid, but that doesn't change it being intended as a joke. And more importantly, that Brianna wasn't actually in real danger, and she knew this. Despite this revelation, Brianna would continue to hold up this joke as a legitimate threat on her life, even announcing she had contacted the FBI over it. She also appeared on the Sci-Fi Channel in an interview for the program The Internet Ruined My Life, where she cried over these very same jokers and how they'd been trying to kill her. The episode aired in 2016, well after the hoax had been exposed, by the way.
We spent about a week and a half out of our house, and at a certain point, you can't live out of a hotel forever.
Interestingly, this segment is actually directly at odds with a 2015 Inc. interview, which states that she spent the better part of a month, not just a week and a half on the run. Just one of the many ways her story kind of just changes over time.
If you're gonna lie, you gotta at least keep it consistent, girl.
When it comes to fleeing her house.
This man himself sent me a very specific, terrifying video.
This is my car, and the other bitch shit is crashed.
Where he claimed he crashed his car on the way to my house. It is the most terrifying thing I've ever seen. Where he swears he's gonna deliver justice to me in his own hands. It made me feel so helpless.
So, being as charitable as I can be, I'm willing to extend the graceful idea that Brianna might have misspoken or been rattled by the harassment and doxing. People get details mixed up, it happens. But as the inconsistencies between Brianna's stories and other evidence mounts, it gets a lot harder to be so charitable. And it's truly regrettable that nobody was willing or likely able to question her stories for fear of being aligned with a verifiable hate movement of antisocial weirdos like Gamergate. Because
That's
Brianna
true.
Wu's long history of having a persecution complex.
Yeah, it's like, we've talked about this recently, like, it's hard to criticize, Gayfesh has said that he doesn't really like Star Wars The Acolyte, but it's really hard to criticize it without coming across like you're just one of those anti-feminist haters for no fucking reason. Like, people just take issue with things for whatever, So yeah, it would be hard at the time. Like this woman who is outwardly claiming like, I'm traumatized by a death threat on my house. It would be hard to be like, well, excuse me, Brianna, you're saying now that you were out of your house for a week and a half, but previously you said that you were out of your home for a whole month. So what's the deal? It's really hard to have that conversation in that time without immediately being like, oh, you're adversarial. You sounded like Mickey Mouse. Yeah, I think that's a fair, that was me trying to represent Brianna Wu and it sounded like Mickey Mouse. I think that's fine. Yeah.
Complex, which again we've seen in her college days and forums, truly came to the forefront in these months. The result is that now.
Yeah, good point. Glamourclaw says, great name by the way. Questioning credibility is different from discrediting someone. There's a valley of difference between those things. Yeah, I agree totally.
Most of the journalism, using the term very loosely here, is from outlets like fucking Breitbart. But they are reporting on verifiable sources, so I have to rely on them for this nightmare. Meanwhile, many more progressive-leaning outfits were outright just okay having Brianna Wu just completely structure and create her own narratives with very little oversight, giving full control to her to ostensibly weave whatever narrative she wanted to, and being that a lot of coverage of Gamergate wasn't from people actually inside the game industry, but mainstream publications looking to cover the sensationalism behind stories like women game devs forced to leave their house, there wasn't a lot of oversight or curtailing for Brianna's narratives. From a Jezebel article about harassment received from women in media where Brianna was interviewed, quote, I had someone last week that made a video talking about how they're going to murder me, we added. It's not just I'm going to kill Brianna, it's like a multi-minute rant about why they want to murder me, how, their face is visible, I have their name and testimony from the people who know them, and how unbalanced they are. This person lives 15 minutes from my house. Wu called the police, which she's had to do numerous times since Gamergate blew up. To her amazement, even this particular threat hasn't resulted in an arrest. This is what I want to emphasize to you. As much as you can have something going for you with death threats, I do, she said. I have a very high profile case. There's so much media attention. I have the ear of the police. They have every reason to want to solve this crime, but at the same time, nothing has happened, even giving them as much information as I have. This article was published January 29th, 2015. In May, just a few months after that article she wrote was published, she had an interview with the Mary Sue where she blamed law enforcement for not
this part is fucking crazy.
acting after receiving a death threat. This would lead to the Ohio prosecutor's office coming out and saying that not only had they not received any reports from Wu, but they had all been forced to waste time and resources after the Mary Sue article led a bunch of people to calling and yelling at them to take action for crimes that Brianna Wu had apparently not actually reported to them. Other tidbits from Brianna's Gamergate odyssey would eventually emerge, including leaked chat logs from Zoe Quinn's Crash Override Network, where several other prominent creators are seen talking about Brianna behind her back in derisive tones.
It's almost like she's not willing to lie to the police. about the death threats that she's not receiving.
Featuring other notable personalities like Peter Coffin and Ian Miles Chong when we put bigger quotations around the word notable. There's a lot of depicting Brianna as a loose cannon who was prone to flying off the handle and, interestingly at the time, inserting herself and taking over conversations about minorities, particularly when it came to transgender.
True.
Because while Brianna was still depicting herself as a cis woman, pretty much the entire world was able to piece together that she was trans, even her allies. One other strange and forgotten piece of Brianna's story is this post on her blog where she claims a former Gamergator sent her an email apologizing for how Brianna was harassed. I am so sorry about the way you have been treated. You're a beautiful, talented, intelligent woman who is worth 1 million of those people involved in Gamergate, myself included. I'm no longer involved in it. In fact, I may just work against. I know, though, it is time for me to stand down from my pedestal and listen to women, to let them steer culture and not resist the betterment and balance they will bring. End quote. Before you ask, this is not the only time Brianna would proudly assert that some unverifiable source just completely agrees with her positions with fawning adulation. This is something that she still does today.
With
From a
fawning
source I would speak to
adulation.
later, she also does this with modern political sources, saying she has meetings, for example, with high-level Democrats, which she does on social media without usually mentioning specifically who. From an anonymous source who worked with Brianna. Quote, she never gave me any specifics about the things that she did. I think in part because she knew that I would ask some questions you might not know to ask if you haven't done that kind of work before. So she was always very vague. She was like, I look at polls, I coordinate with other organizations. I just got so tired of hearing her claiming, I look at polls and I'm constantly talking to high-level Democratic officials and I have meetings. And it's like, where is the evidence of any of that? End quote. So is she just lying? Or just coincidentally talks to more unverifiable people than anybody else on the planet? And lest we forget, by this point she had fabricated Lauren Malovey and would in these years do the same thing again with Natalie O'Brien. Don't go anywhere. We'll talk about Natalie in a second. You might ask, why would someone go through all this? And the only answer I can offer is because it turned Brianna Wu from somebody nobody knew about, working on a game that frankly didn't look that good, to someone that needed your support and the support of gaming outlets when that.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. You're so much better than me and all these other people. A totally real person who really typed that and pressed send. Really, yes. And everybody clapped.
That game came out. Again, in sharp contrast to Zoe and Anita, Brianna continued to insert herself into all kinds of online drama, driving up conflict with Total Biscuit, causing a row over an article about how Samus from the Metroid series is actually trans, and plenty of other small one-off online scuffles that I don't really care about reiterating when the point is she very obviously just relished the spotlight. And with that spotlight, especially after fleeing her home, she soon garnered the scrutiny of online communities like Kiwi Farms. As you might expect for a woman in tech, depicting herself as a brave fighter against vitriolic online harassers who had been covered by dozens of outlets by this point, Brianna's Patreon popped off quite a bit, especially considering one of the main selling points for Patreon was depicted as that money going towards someone at her game company, Giant Space Cat, being hired to specifically deal with harassment. Like the death threats she had cited from people who had publicly admitted to be hoaxes. Let's not put that aside for now. Again, I'm not saying Brianna never got harassed or doxxed. I am stating a fact. She had a history of embellishing the danger she was in. Again, think back to the saga of leaving her house. Then on March 9th, 2015, an anonymous Medium post speculated that instead of using part of the Patreon money to pay the aforementioned Twitter harassment specialist, Natalie O'Brien, the Medium post instead posited the theory that Natalie didn't actually exist. Brianna had made her up and simply pocketed the money. Already, this should sound familiar. Brianna is a liar, we've established that, but we've also established a history of evidence that she's a liar. Of course, she's never come out to admit to making up a girlfriend in college, making up harassing emails, making up entire people. So if at this point you still want to give the benefit of the doubt to say, maybe she did hire Natalie, maybe she didn't make her up, I want you to ask yourself, what are the odds of one person having multiple examples of even maybe making up people to entirely agree with or support them, and having strong evidence that they've done this multiple times? And if you have any remaining doubts as to whether Brianna is a liar or these are just the most coincidental coincidences ever, by the end of the video, I aim to lay all of those doubts to rest. From the Medium post, quote, I initially became suspicious when having a conversation with a local friend involved in IT who had previously a business dealing with Brianna. When I mentioned that I donated to her Patreon, he suggested that I do a little more digging on the veracity of her claims. In doing so, I noticed several claims that seemed dubious. The one that concerns me most is of Natalie O'Brien because it is a purely financial matter and does not involve subjective ideas about politics or social justice. Simply enough, Brianna Wu has likely made over $30,000 over the course of her patron's existence, and there's no evidence that the person she claims to be paying the money to, or any other person filling such a role, exists. In reaching out to fellow bosses,
just like, again, making up an entire human person. Yeah, mixed president, a second woman made up by Brianna Wu has struck the expose. What's up, Silent? I hope you're doing good. Oh, yeah, this is funny.
Sonians in the gaming and coding community, I've not found a single person who knows a Natalie O'Brien. Further, in reaching out to people who have supposedly worked at Giant Space Cat Games with Natalie O'Brien, the only response I got from someone who had never heard of Natalie O'Brien or a pregnant employee at Giant Space Cat at all. When I contacted other members of the Giant Space Cat and Brianna Wu's professional circle, I was met with ignored emails and immediate blocks on Twitter. The lack of an answer is even more damning than simply hearing that the employees had never heard of Natalie O'Brien. It's one thing to not be aware of someone you work with, but it seems like an incredible overreaction to, instead of simply saying if you don't know the person or not, circle your wagons and refuse to speak on the subject. The only person in Brianna's social or professional circle who's been willing to speak publicly on the subject of Natalie O'Brien is former contract employee Emma Clarkson, and she also doubts Natalie's existence. Now, Brianna did respond, and after a few back and forth comments, she immediately turned to a regular deflection, saying, quote, Look, I was willing to entertain outside chances you were legit, even though the odds were astronomical this was Gamergate. But give me a break. This is the adult world. I wasn't born yesterday, or as we said in Mississippi growing up, I didn't fall off the turnip truck. If you're legit, write us. We'll check your name against our records, and have a phone call with a person you think doesn't exist, but you're not legit. End of line. Oh, sick Tron reference, Bree. That nerd reference is definitely going to age super well, even though it's only said in the movies by two villains. First, in the 1982 Steven Lisberger classic, when the Master Control Program is trying to extort Ed Dillinger, and second in the 2011 follow-up Tron Legacy, when Castor gets blown up by Clue. But, you know. Tron references aside, there's still no real evidence Natalie O'Brien ever worked at Giant Space Cat. Even at the time, she wasn't featured in any of the photos posted of the studio, and would have been one of, if not the only employee to not have any social media presence, despite apparently being specifically hired as a social media consultant to, according to Brianna, work full-time to run interference for the harassment and death threats Brianna was attracted. This lack of any representation, and most notably no photographic evidence of any kind, should ring familiar to Lauren Malovies. So with all this information at your disposal, draw what conclusions you will. Nobody ever talks about Tron 2.0, the first-person shooter made by Monolith, the same people who made Fear and Condemned. I'd rather talk about Tron 2.0 than Brianna. They had a Game Boy Advance spin-off. Had first-person full 3D sequences where you've got to fly a recognizer and a light tank. You fly a recognizer in first person. Before I move on, I need to talk about Chloe Segal.
And also, Jordan, you're a fucking dork. Yeah.
I want to be clear, I do not want to sensationalize Brianna's relationship to Chloe. But during this period, trans game developer Chloe Segal had a public falling out with Brianna, claiming that Brianna ruined her life and refused to help her. Chloe sadly ended up taking her life in DMs that would later be leaked. I think Brianna comes across as less than sympathetic in the midst of Chloe breaking down and pleading with her. Again, I want to be very clear here. I bring this up mostly so that there isn't 1,000 comments talking about this piece of internet lore and trying to blame it on Brianna. I think at the end of the day, Chloe was a deeply troubled person and didn't get the comfort and support all people should have when going through some really hard shit. And when people feel helpless and like there's nowhere else to turn, sometimes it can end very badly. And I also won't pretend to know what it's like to have someone you know do that and then spend the rest of your life wondering if there was more you could have done. I imagine that is what Brianna struggles with, and she doesn't need any other kind of invective to deal with around this particular issue if that's the case. What I can say is that suicide is never the answer, and you always have someone who will go out of their way to help you, so don't be afraid to reach out. Nobody is a burden, so don't be afraid to let others help you if you need it. As I've illustrated, there are plenty of points throughout Brianna's story that seem embellished or fabricated, but that doesn't mean she deserves to be blamed for something horrible like this. And I want to go on record, I don't think she should be. There are valid parts of Brianna's story to call attention to. This isn't one of them. And like I said,
Tron, the movie, I believe, is entirely responsible for Ultimate Frisbee. Yeah, I mean, fucking hard to argue with that.
I bring it up specifically to stop any speculation that might happen in the comments or questions about why I don't explain it later. So with that out of the way, let's get back to some Gamergate-related happenings. Again, as loath as I am to source these dorks, sites like Bounding Into Comics were some of the only people noting Zoe Quinn's displeasure at Brianna's announcement in 2021 that Brianna had begun working on a Gamergate TV series. And I think that this TV series, which thankfully never materialized and sounded awful, consisting entirely of fictional characters, is actually a really good capstone to understand how Brianna fits into Gamergate. Where people like Zoe and Anita try to move on and have been vocal that they don't want to keep being defined by this period in their lives, Brianna continues to find ways to bring her involvement back into the spotlight and even attempts to continue monetizing it as part of her creative endeavors, like the ill-fated TV show. And if you thought Brianna, Zoe, and Anita had some kind of kindred bond, think again, as in these 2022 DMs I've received, Brianna shit talks her fellow Gamergate targets, accusing them of being bad about trans people and trying to hog the spotlight, which is ironic, considering all Brianna did to be defined by Gamergate, but still, she didn't want to just be defined by Gamergate, as she writes in this self-aggrandizing 2015 article in The Guardian. Quote, I was at a bar a few weeks ago having drinks with a well-known journalist. Do you think my career is going to be defined by Gamergate? I asked him worriedly. He looked me dead in the eye and said, I think it depends on if you can pivot. At some point, you need to use your raised profile to move on to new things. I'm taking that advice and pivoting. I'm sure the misogynist fringe of Gamergate will continue to make our lives hell in any way they can. They'll continue to threaten me and other women, intimidate and bully us, but at a certain point, we just have to get back to work. Besides, we make games, they make internet comments. Who really has the power? Indeed, so let's see what Brianna would pivot to next. I'll give you a hint. It wasn't making more video games.
Oh, fun. Yeah, this is when she gets into politics. I haven't seen this part of the video.
It should be no surprise by now that Brianna's abrasive tendencies would isolate many people who should have been her natural allies. Even in those leaked group chats, we saw people seeing her as a loose cannon. And since Gamergate, she continued on her same trend of pushing away anyone who didn't fall in line, denying accountability and stretching the truth to the breaking point. As a result, when I reached out to people who used to work with her, they didn't have very many good things to say about her. We will get to their testimony more as we continue through Brianna's timeline, but here's a sneak peek. At their request, all interviewees have chosen to remain anonymous. From somebody who spent time working with Brianna during Progressive Victory. Quote, I would never work with her again, and I would advise other people not to work.
Didn't Brianna Wu, like, help fund Progressive Victory, or she was, like, one of the first major contributors along with Destiny? And she was, like, friendly with Destiny up until a certain point.
With her, because I do think she's the kind of person who will use somebody and then spit them out the second they aren't useful.
Oh, Kitty says Ultimate Frisbee was invented in 1968.
Or not willing to bootlick. My impression was she was going for people who at the very least wouldn't question her narratives. I despised the time I spent working with her. I've never despised working with someone else in my career. She was very incompetent. She seemed to lie a lot in a professional capacity. It was bizarre and off-putting, and I didn't like it, and I don't know anyone who worked underneath her or beside her who wound up having a positive experience. End quote. So with those to look forward to, we still have to get through Brianna's next chapter after Gamergate, running for Congress. Twice,
Yay.
technically. Brianna's political ambitions came on a wave of progressive sentiment that emerged after Trump's 2016 electoral win, and by several interviews she seems to have aligned more with what she would eventually call the radical leftists. I want to call quick attention to this early interview Brianna did in 2017, where when asked about her roadmap other people should follow for getting involved in politics, she advocates running it like one of her startups. We remember her startups, right? It's also very funny that she would mention getting a lawyer to look at FEC rules when her campaign would fail to meet those standards for filing, but that's a little bit later. Again, however, we see Brianna's ever-present overconfidence, much like she took on the game industry with no experience and started an animation startup with no experience. She pursued a congressional run with no actual political experience, even as a commentator. Unless you count a variety of articles with very little oversight, she had managed...
What did she try to run for? Like, I don't know if she tried to run for state Congress, but like... Yeah, like usually the first thing you do is try to run for, I mean, maybe not even the first thing you do, but one of the earlier things you do is trying to get to the House of Representatives of your state, because that tends to be like a lower barrier of entry, and then you go up into the Senate, and then maybe you go into like the House of Representatives at the federal level, or maybe governor or something around there, and then like Senate. And then once you've been a senator, people take you more seriously to run for president. Anyway.
To get on a variety of websites in the years since 2014. I'd also not be doing my due diligence if I didn't mention her self-designed campaign logo. Like, all of those years in art school and being an artist had to be good for something, right?
Yeah, it's horrible. It's so bad.
Well, alas. Relatively fresh from her Gamergate spotlight, Brianna got some press coverage for this congressional run, but it wouldn't translate to anything being actually done at the polls. In fact,
she ran for Massachusetts 8th District. Oh, okay. So what? It was House then? It's a little funny to me how much she hates Doe, considering I've only ever seen Doe ask the question, has Brianna Wu actually been successful at anything she's tried? Wait, when did Doe... I didn't know that Brianna had said shit about Doe. Honestly, talking shit on Doe is the biggest red flag. Especially because Doe has been, like, out of the loop for so long now. And it never even was, like, a huge streamer. You know, it was still doing shit like sex work to make the ends meet and everything. Like, I don't know. Ugh. Yeah, she did initially run for the House. Okay, cool. But yeah, hating Doe, red flag.
She didn't make it past the Democratic primaries, meaning she didn't even get enough support to be put on an election ballot. She also forgot to file with the FEC or Federal Election Commission, as these publicly available documents show.
No!
And you might ask, well,
that's terrible.
Even if she didn't have a lot of experience and the campaign didn't get very far, maybe she had good ideas. Her now infamous moon rocks tweet might provide some insight where she pontificates about the tactical value of moon rocks dropped from the moon to Earth. I really, really want to think this is just an incredibly deadpan joke. That's not exactly her style and would be odd to make during an attempted campaign. For further proof of her political insights, I'd point you to this campaign appearance she made in Massachusetts. She starts by selling herself as having spent her entire life in software engineering before jumping right into talking about Russia hacking the US and our infrastructure. Again, she wasn't really into software engineering and certainly wasn't for her whole life.
I've spent my entire life working in software engineering. If you've been watching the news at all today, you can see that we're having quite a few problems with Russia, information warfare, bot warfare, having our infrastructure hacked. There was even a story last week that came out that was showing how actually Russia had penetrated our power plants here in the United States.
She essentially humble brags
that is a
here
real
about
risk.
having...
That is like a real risk. Cyber attacks on utilities. But weird for Brianna Wu to be talking about that now after having like never talked about that before, as far as I can tell.
A Law & Order episode based on her life next, and then brings up that she worked for Hillary Clinton's campaign. Now, this is an aside that we will talk about more once we get to Brianna's current crop of podcast appearances, including her Dollcast podcast. But one thing I've noticed is that when speaking off the cuff, Brianna loves to name drop famous people, even when it has little to no bearing on the conversation. So just put a pin in that. This was one of the first times I'd actually seen Brianna speak, and it was really a moment where everything snapped into place for me. She talks a bit about how we need to get big, unaccountable, dark money groups out of politics, which will be very funny in a minute. All of the questions at the beginning are bizarrely given by her husband Frank, where she mentions also some of her friends she knew served in the Iraq War.
So today is the 15th anniversary of the invasion in Iraq. 4,000 Americans died, 100,000 Iraqis, maybe more, died. I know that you knew people that had served over there, many of whom had sacrificed a lot. What are your thoughts?
So I think more than anything else has happened in my lifetime. The Iraq War is really what defined me as a person. And I get to tear up here because I had people I deeply cared about that gave their lives in that war. And it was 15 years ago today that we invaded Iraq.
Were these people real? Use your best judgment at this point.
Again.
I'd honestly like to give Brianna any kind of leeway, especially when she's telling anecdotal stories about people who suffered in the war, but I can't, especially after literally everything she's done. But I want to talk about Frank. See, essentially she uses him as a surrogate for fielding questions throughout and actually takes one from the crowd towards the end of the video, but it comes off as odd and stilted. Why not just take questions from the crowd the whole time if that's who you're here to engage? The answer is probably because for Brianna, that no longer makes it a controlled environment where she can bounce between pre-decided talking points like her Iraq war friends and Gamergate harassment experience. And without those talking points, she's not able to name drop and verify her experience as much to a crowd who doesn't know who she is.
Yeah.
And also because when she answers a question off book, it goes something like this.
Also, continuing the conversation about the climate change issue.
Absolutely.
A lot of the conversations around renewable energies, looking for hopefully best available technology.
I've seen nano machines that have the potential to solve some of this. I was actually on a jet the other day and talking to someone about this. I want to tell you, I am in Silicon Valley a lot, and I speak at MIT a lot. I've never seen a solution yet for that, but I do know we've got to really double down and quadruple down on our science to get us there. Trump is slashing the NHS. We're slashing scientific funding. So it frustrates me that my industry, technology, is often seeking out how to do better shaders for guns in video games or doing
Do we have an
things that seem
NHS?
kind of
Is one
superfluous
of
to
our
me.
organizations
Citing
called
nanomachines.
NHS?
Congressional run. This was in 2018, and her candidacy, as I mentioned, would go nowhere, despite reportedly raising over $200,000 in
bothering
funds
my
according
cat.
to Open
You
Secrets.
can't see.
According to that same website, the funding source seems to be pretty divided between donations and cash funding, not unlikely from Frank Wu. Yet, in 2020, Brianna...
Nanomachines, son. That's... It's very... This is... I mean, I'm glad that this is as entertaining as it is, to be completely honest. Like, I kind of feel like Brianna Wu is just kind of a mean girl and, like, not very interesting. So I didn't expect this to be as funny as it is. So, thank you, Jordan. Thank you, thank you, thank you. When we get done with this video, we're all going to go over there and we're going to click the like button and we're going to comment it. We're going to comment something, okay? Yeah, did she mean NIH? Because we do not have, and I don't think any of our organizations are called NHS here. I think she meant the NIH.
I would run again and receive over $200,000 in donations for Brianna Wu for Congress, including contributions from both her campaign
Yeah, I know it's a bizarre story. I was actually on a jet the other day.
and from Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks, who is running for Congress as well. I'll talk more about their link in a moment. The thing is, Brianna didn't even make it as far into the primaries as last time, dropping out and citing the ongoing COVID pandemic at the time. In a traditional Brianna fashion we've come to know and loathe by now, in a Medium post that signaled the end of her so far final
Obligatory. COVID still here. Very much. 1,000 Americans die every week from COVID still. Protect yourselves. She's constantly doing the clumsiest job of making herself sound important. Yeah. She's always like overinflating herself in whatever context it is.
Political race, she went on to detail a very likely fictionalized, though still sensationalized story that, similarly to her story years earlier, would just so happen to perfectly represent a moment in her life and culture as a whole that she can illustrate to make a point. Think back to that story about seeing the little girl on her motorcycle. But when you look at the actual expenses of Brianna's candidacy, I can't help but ask the question, then where did almost $300,000 in donations go? Which might give you even more deja vu to Brianna's other projects and suspicious monetary incidents like the Kickstarter.
Just got a booster? Good job, Glamour Claw. I guess, man, it really sucks. Well, I don't even know what's gonna... Oh, man. I don't even know what's gonna happen this year. By the way, very great. That's a good pause moment. Jordan is so pretty. Are we even gonna get boosters this year? Like, that is a good question. I did not get... So I got my booster in August last year, which was before the Renaissance Festival and before the new vaccine came out. So there's a new booster that I haven't gotten yet. And I guess I'll get that one if I can, before I think that we're gonna probably try to go back to Kansas in like September, for like to go to the Renaissance Festival and to visit family and to celebrate our anniversary. Yeah, so I guess I should get whatever the most recent vaccine is sometime in August. Fucking whooping cough outbreak is live in my county right now. Jesus, no, that's not good. And you have an infant, so that's fucking terrifying. Oh my God, protect the baby.
money that went to a non-existent person, and of course her startup at 19 that went nowhere. In fact, when you count up some estimates between the combined campaign costs of about $500,000, $200,000 for the animation studio, and an estimate of more than $400,000 for Revolution 60, Brianna's hit-to-miss ratio is like over $1 million in expenses across her career with almost nothing meaningful to show for it, let alone revenue to reflect the expenditures. Now, thankfully, much of what's been spent by the 2020 Woo campaign is publicly available on the FEC website. There are a handful of odd expenditures that might raise eyebrows, like the contributions giving Frank Woo almost $900 for travel expenses. Two other big payees, the Insurrection Inc. and Casale Keller Consulting, were paid in the several thousands and are consulting firms that purport to be against big money in Washington. So I guess that's not big money by Washington standards. Many of the expenses are innocuous, like stamps.com and payments to Squarespace. But then they show several expenditures.
Oh no, from Louisiana, we just got our first confirmed measles case. Oh God, I'm fucking so sorry. It's so bad right now.
From the campaign to both Brianna Wu herself and Rebellion PAC, a political action group started by Wu and Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks. Rebellion PAC described it.
Yeah, true. Yeah. It sucks having kids in school. That's the fucking worst.
Itself as, quote, a clean pack fighting for progressive working class values across the country. Rebellion PAC is electing leaders who fight for working class values and against wealth inequality. We are a hybrid PAC committed to electing leaders at the federal, state, and local level. We unapologetically stand for civil rights, gender equality, and LGBT rights. Welcome to a stronger America. Welcome to the rebellion. Notably, this rebellion has now metastasized into a politically adrift money fund attached to Cenk, who has taken a broadly centrist turn and even appeared at a Turning Point USA event earlier this year. And Brianna, who in stark contrast with previous advocation against political PACs and dark money, now spends her days ranting about how trans people need to cut community with non-binary people, or really just any trans person she doesn't think meets her weird arbitrary definitions. Don't worry, we're getting there. Hold on, it's been a long journey, I know. But that brings us to Brianna's
like
actions.
We haven't even
since
gotten to the part where
been...
she's actively a transphobe all the time right now. Brianna would be like, not to brag, but I just saw a movie with someone in it. You may have heard of him. George Clooney. Like, okay.
The Rebellion PAC with Cenk, and a stint at another political action group, Progressive Victory, and that's about it. Brianna was at the Progressive Victory PAC from roughly December 2023 to 2024, apparently working alongside Destiny and Vosh, until she suddenly left. The PAC was simply organized to push Democratic canvassing efforts during the 2024 season from everything I've seen.
I stopped associating with Progressive Victory when they hired Riley Gaines to be their social media manager.
Interestingly, in some group chats I've been provided with, she still shit talks people like Destiny in private, at least she did in 2022, where she described hate watching his content, called him a narcissist.
I hate ragging on people for this, but I've seen like several typos in Brianna's writings that have appeared on here, and it just bothers me. If you're gonna be that haughty about being the fucking best, like it doesn't. You're not fulfilling the image for me. If you misspell shit, I don't. It just, if you're gonna be like that, then you gotta be like that. You know what I mean?
And she'd also go on to privately praise his Twitter account being suspended, saying, "Rip Bozo." Now, none of this would stop her from collabing with him 2 years later, so much for standards. The official Destiny wiki cites her leaving over a different vision for the PAC. If I had to guess, this is another case of Brianna being hard to work with on group projects, which should feel familiar if you remember the Gamergate era group chat she was mentioned in and the testimony of people who used to work at her game studio. But I don't need to speculate. In fact, I know exactly that's what happened because I spoke to someone else who worked directly with Brianna on Progressive Victory, and they attest to her not only constantly shifting the blame, not putting in her portion of the work, but also being vindictive and unnecessarily rude. From an anonymous source who worked with Brianna at Progressive Victory. Quote, "This is just my experience having worked with her. It was really bad. There was instances where she made other people on the team cry. How? Just kind of an abusive approach to management. There was a time I was brought into a meeting and she asked, why am I not able to get a good emotional read on you? And I was like, I don't know, I'm on the spectrum. And I had to walk her through what autistic people experience in this meeting. And it felt really intrusive and gross. It was on the heels of another person on the team. They had come out of a meeting in tears and they told me about it. People were just very on edge around her. And even at the time, did not fully seem to trust her. They talk about how she was barely available and would shift the blame and didn't really actually..."
Typos make pretentiousness feel like jumping the shark. Yeah, a bit, yeah.
Seemed to care that much about the work she was doing there. Quote, "She was supposed to be in charge of this project and effort, and she skipped half of the check-in meetings and was AWOL for a good portion of what I had been brought on to help with. Whenever she did get involved, it wound up being kind of a disaster. For example, when Progressive Victory would ask why we aren't meeting these goals, it would become my fault, even though I was doing what she had been telling me to do. And I assume no additional inputs meant keep doing what you're doing. She always found a way to make something somebody else's fault when it was clearly on her plate and clearly her screw-up."
Yeah.
My last interaction with Brianna Wu, essentially it was the last day of my contract. We get on a meeting and she's like, you gotta do this, and I had been pulling my weight, and she had not been showing up to our meetings. She had a conversation with someone higher up in Progressive Victory calling her out on that, so she was really upset with me. So I was like, okay, I can do these things, but just so you know, it's the last day of my contract, I'm not going to be renewing. And she was like, oh, okay, I hate working with you, and hung up the call.
Oh my God, what
End
a
quote.
bitch.
Now, Brianna hasn't stopped using her political expertise and her positions on these PACs.
That's crazy. Wow. Okay. Just straight up like, okay, I hate working with you. Click. Oh my God, dude.
To continue getting new spots on podcasts or, citing these experiences, very loose quotations, on her shows like The Dollcast, while continually drifting further to the right, at least in regards to the two primary issues she busies herself with these days, Zionism and trans healthcare. Don't worry, we're going to get to Brianna's cuddling up to turfs and the unknowable bridges she's burnt in pursuit of her latest spotlight, but I want to go back to Rebellion PAC for a second. What does Rebellion PAC actually do? According to the FEC, which lists Brianna as the PAC's treasurer, Rebellion raised over $400,000, but it's hard to find what the money's been used for, aside from paying Brianna, Cenk, and the rest of the PAC leadership. Apparently, according to another source who's chosen to remain anonymous, Brianna likes to talk a lot about meeting with high-level Democrats, about organizing grand ideas that seem to never materialize, and when asked for her sources, often responds by saying she gets her information from quote-unquote looking at polling. Now, it turns out that's probably from Rebellion PAC's relationship with vendors like Digital Strategy Group, which received over $100,000 from the PAC in 2024.
Yeah,
Digital Strategy Group is owned by Eric Coates and Sam Jacobson. Digital Strategy Group is owned by Eric Coates and Sam Jacobson, who also own 1983 Labs LLC, which is a company that specializes in polling. Is this connecting a dot? I don't know. But I think it's interesting when Brianna apparently repeatedly talks so much about how she values and studies polls. Because honestly, I couldn't tell you what the fuck else Rebellion PAC could possibly be doing. Judging solely by the dead social media pages that haven't posted in 3 years, I think it's safe to say they aren't making a big push, or at least didn't during the election. And I'm not the only one wondering this. This Medium post from Andrew Landra, a DC political consultant, is possibly an insight into Rebellion PAC and Brianna. He starts off by expressing concern for Brianna, depicting her as someone he's long defended and spoken highly of behind closed doors. Then he goes on to detail his questions to Brianna about Rebellion PAC, questioning its dedication to fighting dark money when much of its output was unaccountable, asking Brianna in polite terms to illustrate what the PAC has actually accomplished and what candidates it supported. Andrew notes two of the largest—
Oh, it's so hard to be confronted like that, I bet. Ooh.
Contributors are Zeta Global and Digital Strategy Group, asking what they do and why they donate to Rebellion. Zeta Global is a marketing company, and like we mentioned, Digital Strategy Group is another consulting company. He wanted to get the record straight, and Brianna's response was essentially, not unless I have full editorial control. Keep this in mind for some of the other podcasts and her current opinions as we dive into them in a few minutes. During a conversation with Eli Ehrlich for an entirely different video, she also gave me some insight into Brianna's business style.
She actually reached out to me to help with a lawsuit, I want to say 2 years ago, and was very kind, very supportive. She did not give a shit that I was saying that I would help people access hormones. And since then, I think she's picked up that she can get a lot of attention and a lot of money from going on this right-wing grift tour. It's such an intense pivot. It's fascinating. I don't think that she really necessarily believes all of it. But I think that she's scared. She's scared of the current administration, and she thinks that throwing all other trans people under the bus will help her personally. I feel like her politics are evolving by the day as she gets more publicity and attention. It does seem to align with her general style. I mean, she quite famously laundered hundreds of thousands of dollars using her political PAC, and has a—
Eli Ehrlich is just like, yeah, she quite famously did this unscrupulous thing, and I'm like, and Jordan has so far been treating it like, where'd the money go, Brianna? But Eli's like, yeah, that was money laundering. That's very bold.
The penchant for attention. I mean, also, this is a multimillionaire. She has no real worries in the world.
See, as we see with Andrew Landra and countless times in the past, Brianna doesn't like being called out. It doesn't matter how suspicious something might look. It doesn't matter how many times she's had suspicious things happen near her. She really doesn't take any kind of accountability, always foisting the blame elsewhere or failing that, just ignoring the problem until it goes away. Now, despite never making any impact in any field she's ever been in, from writing to animation to game design to politics, she continues to wear all this massive amount of experience on her sleeve. She then uses this experience to get more exposure and spots on talk shows where she can authoritatively talk about politics because she's been a candidate. You see, she's part of Rebellion PAC. She must know what the fuck she's talking about. Insert callbacks for moon rocks, nanomachines, etc. From everyone I've spoken to, it seems like Brianna has mostly made it as far as she has by simply faking it until she makes it, relying on the trust of others to not question her or her narratives. From an anonymous source who worked with Brianna, specific details have been withheld to preserve anonymity. Quote, hearing her selling herself, her pitch was basically, well, I'm different because I have actual experience. And that was appealing because it seems like there's such a lack of experience-based perspective in the online political world. She spoke about her experiences in a way that did not initially set off my bullshit alarm. At least for quite a while, we had very similar political perspectives. I think I was blinded by the trust that she actually did so many of the things she claims to have done. Over time, I started to get more suspicious, and seeing how she was responding to certain controversies.
Again, about her credibility. She keeps presenting herself as like, I've done all these things. I've done all these things. Look at my resume. But like, it's like if you called any of her references, they would be like, what? I don't know what you're talking about.
I tried to do my own research on who she is and what she's actually accomplished in any of the organizations and roles she's claimed to have been successful in. With her, I was looking for reasons to believe she was who I thought she was. I wasn't looking for dirt. I was hoping I would look it up and find evidence of what she's claimed to have done. I even said that to— I said, hey, I'm getting the feeling increasingly like she either hasn't done the things she says she's done, or she's really bad at communicating it. I don't have anything concrete about her. I've looked for it.
Gracious to assume that she's just really bad at communicating.
And it's always just stories and just trust me. And because of her attempts to appeal to a more centrist right-wing audience and her now trademark inability to take any criticism, at least from the left, Brianna Wu has spent the last few years making more enemies than friends. Because more than anything she does now, Brianna excels at alienating and pushing away people. And at this point, I don't think she can help it. Like the film project she was brought on, and then like a month later, they released a public statement distancing themselves from her.
Oh yeah, that was funny.
Now, publicly, she's been adamantly vicious about her stances on trans healthcare, and
I always thought a trans woman failing upward would be awesome to watch. Sad face. True. That's funny.
Her support of Israel's ongoing civilian genocide in Gaza. But she likes to couch this all in a pragmatic approach, that she's a serious political operative who really looks at the landscape and knows which way the wind is blowing. But behind closed doors, or at least in DMs, she's a bitch of a different color. One that seems to relish being mean-spirited and tries constantly to wrangle others to fall in line with what she wants. One of the more notable examples had to do with her playing the role of a high school mean girl in leaked DMs about Bonnie, a trans woman formerly with TYT, when Bonnie was early in transition. In those same leaked DMs, Brianna would agree that pronouns had been pushed to insanity and say Bonnie looked like a transvestite, while agreeing that non-binary people were partly to blame for the anti-trans social shift. This, despite previous stances where she claimed to unequivocally support non-binary people. You see, these texts are just vicious bullying. By the way, there's no excuse for them. These DMs came out in 2023, preceding the more broad right-wing appeal she's been aiming for. But they very publicly showed Brianna to be, at best, someone who advocated for things publicly she didn't believe in privately, and at worst, was an opportunistic liar. While Brianna would try and save some face by saying the leaked photos were out of context and limply try and take some form of accountability when she's actually backed into a corner, this kind of mean girl gossip is a common occurrence with her. In other DMs, like this leaked signal chat, she calls out other activists like Alejandra Caraballo as toxic, citing everyone Brianna knows who's worked—
Oh my gosh, babe. It's Spanish. Caraballo.
with her. In that same breath, she accuses—
Called her a transvestite. Yeah.
Aaron Reed of being cut from a toxic cloth and says that a group she's part of lacks integrity. We saw earlier how she shit-talked Destiny, but that's not the only person she worked with that she'd be disparaging of, as she in these same signal chats would claim Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks has shitty opinions and called into question his choices like a presidential run. I've redacted the names here, so if Brianna watches this, she might just know who these are from, or she might have just lost track of all the people she's threatened and disparaged and talked shit about. I think that's probably the more likely answer. Either way, I received several messages and DMs from other prominent members of the trans and queer community interacting directly with Brianna. These texts show who Brianna really is, how she tries to pressure others to fall in line with her political ambitions. She constantly tries to leverage others to agree with her, never attempting to be sympathetic to their point of view, if it won't gain her something. On a personal level, I think these DMs show a genuine lack of—
Yeah, anyone shitting on Aaron Reed needs a hug. Yeah, I can't argue with that.
Empathy on Brianna's part, where she seems so blinded by her my way or the highway attitude, she ignores the experiences and ideas of others consistently. So by now we have a pretty consistent portrait of Brianna as someone who will bully others, shift blame, and deny most accountability, all the while touting experience and connections she really seems to just not have. It shouldn't surprise you that she is also trying to engage in hiring people to gather information on who she deems her political opponents. And I have the texts and emails to prove it. From another anonymous source, in 2023, Brianna attempted to hire someone to compile information on political targets like Jackson Hinkle, offering thousands of dollars for essentially a bounty for people she didn't agree with. I do want to note that oppo research, or oppositional research, is a pretty common practice in Washington, D.C. political and lobbyist circles. But the way Brianna claims to go about it here is just so bizarre. I can't imagine anybody normally familiar with oppositional research and how dossiers like that are put together would look at this and be like, yeah, that's a completely normal way to go about business. She even went so far as to consult her lawyer for how to pay for the person she was trying to commission. I actually really like this letter from her lawyer, by the way, because it's written in the nicest legalese way. That seems like the lawyer is just trying to say, hey, don't. Now, being the masterful political operator she is, if you need more evidence that Brianna was behind this, she said this in a Twitter post in November 2023. In other messages, she claims to have already done this in the past, paying quite a sum for dirt on people who aren't named, though she gives an estimate between $5,000 and $20,000 she's previously paid for these dossiers, leading me to think there's been multiple? Now, is this Brianna weaving another strand in her ever-expanding web of bullshit? I don't know, honestly. If she was willing to go far enough to consult a lawyer on this, I don't see why she wouldn't have paid for this kind of thing in the past. If it was revealed that Brianna didn't tend to use these dossiers for blackmail or extortion, which is honestly the only reason I could see her doing this, it would have been insanely illegal. As not only is blackmail illegal, but Brianna likely would have been using funds from Progressive Victory and or Rebellion PAC. But with Brianna, I have no idea if all of this is bullshit. Like she could have absolutely just been lying to this person and giving them inflated hopes for something that never would have materialized in the first place. And I can't help but wonder again, why? Brianna is not an elected rep. She's not even running for anything. She has a cushy job where she seems to barely do anything, but also can't stand opposition and loves to target people who disagree with her. Was she doing this for blackmail? Was she trying to extort someone? Why Jackson Hinkle? There are so many other questions that this leads us to, but the ineffable conclusion is Brianna is a snake who seems to see herself as some masterful political manipulator. I want to preface the last few sections of this video with these DMs and accounts of Brianna.
I just don't have much commentary right now. Like, this is the conclusion. There's just not much to add
behind the scenes, because I think along with everything else we've dug through together by now, they paint a cohesive picture of who Brianna is. And even with all the plastic surgery she loves to show off, like Dorian Gray, that illustration is anything but pretty. See, modern Brianna Wu isn't just someone who tries to force others behind the scenes to step in line with her while making snide jokes she thinks nobody is listening to. She's also taken, as I've mentioned several times now, a broad approach to trans ideology in an attempt to endear herself to more conservative minds. This includes hanging out with noted racist and white supremacist leaner Lauren Southern, as the two checked out Brianna's Porsche collection.
Wow.
I need to mention this so you don't forget that Brianna is still fucking incredibly rich, apparently, as she continues to talk about and try to represent the struggles of
Yeah,
community.
she has 4 Porsches. This is an excellent example of how hard work can lead to financial success.
That overwhelmingly isn't. Speaking of being part of a community or lack thereof, Brianna publicly came out as trans in 2014, and collectively, everyone just kind of went, yeah, we know. And along the ride, there's been no shortage of fun tweets. Remember the KKK one? Notably, she's also buddied up to Richard Hanania. Now, Richard is your garden variety pseudo-intellectual who likes to use flowery prose to make basic observations about society seem profound. He's like a living version of those Facebook memes where someone's face chained to their phone, except he's also racist. He's written positively in the past about race science and eugenics, but most telling, I feel, about Richard was the time he shared a video of Grand Theft Auto 5 and thought it was maybe a real terrorist attack in Los Angeles. He deleted it, but unfortunately the internet doesn't forget. I've always found the best way to explain what someone believes is to let them say it themselves. To that end, I've listened now to over a dozen hours of Brianna's various appearances on shows like Trigonometry and The Dollcast to bring you her opinions in her own words without the Twitter character count. Now let's talk about The Dollcast. In 2024, Brianna attempted not to just rebrand herself, but craft a rebranded trans rights movement. Not my words, this is the description of The Dollcast, a podcast featuring 4 trans women. Quote, Dollcast is the trans rights reboot, less extreme, more thoughtful, and willing to have fearless conversations. As of writing, this podcast has been around for about 6 months and has less than 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. It's a wonder why when trans rights are constantly under attack by conservatives, and the only conversations Brianna seems to fearlessly care about is with dickheads like Richard Hanania. But more than her personal quirks, I want to talk about Dollcast because it represents Brianna's modern trans rights takes as well. And by which I mean, it's essentially a group of incredibly sheltered and privileged women talking shit about anyone they don't feel adequately passes. Their purity tests.
What's with the massive CRT in the background? That's very distracting now that I see it. What is that for? Why is it in the background of your podcast? I get the couch, that's fine, but like, why a giant TV?
For who really is or isn't transgender. Brianna also has a preoccupation with targeting non-binary people, and particularly transmasc and transmasc non-binary people, buying into explicit TERF talking points, with no pushback from the other hosts.
Oh, for classic games. Oh yeah, fair enough. Yeah, no, okay, fine.
That trans ad that is playing. I live in Massachusetts and it is on the air every 4 seconds. I was walking out the bathroom at the movie theater the other day and this ad comes on the air and it's got like a trans woman with a very deep voice and then it shows Rachel Levine and then it shows a bunch of drag queens and then it goes into Kamala Harris wants gender affirming surgery for prisoners and then it ends with the tagline like Trump is for us, Kamala is for they them. It's using these caricatures of trans women as drag queens and then using us to scare the public and then linking like a bunch of ideas together like drag queens, trans women, non-binary people into the soup to basically make people hate us. And it's a really dispiriting thing to see an election about this explosion of very young children that are non-binary. I've got a really good friend of mine. He was telling me
Yeah, that's just explicitly transphobic. It's rapid onset gender dysphoria. She just didn't use that word.
Class, they were having a coming out day, and like half the class was raising their hand, not saying, hi, I'm gay or lesbian, but I'm non-binary. And it's not that I'm saying I don't think that they're going through something real there. I'm saying that just pragmatically, if you've got armies of these kids coming out in schools, it is scaring the parents.
But maybe she's got some incisive political commentary to offer, what with having 2 congressional campaigns. If you thought that, those notions should be quickly dispelled. Episode 1 sees her basically blaming Democrats kowtowing to radical progressives for
Yeah, I think that's probably more of it, Eric. Yeah, Eric says, I play classic games too, but I'm not going to make my big ugly TV my background for my professional shit. Maybe a cute old one, but not that. Yeah. I mean, I obviously care a lot about what's in my background. I specifically curate my office space. This is an inefficient use of my office space. I want to be clear. If I set my office up in a way that was like having nothing to do with the background, like I would have a more economical use of my space. It's a very inconvenient, clunky way to have my space set up, but it's important to me to have control over what's in the background. Like, it matters to me that I always want to just have a blank wall that I can do something with. That's my personal preference, I guess. But it's like, this is my job, and so I orient my office around it. So it maybe is just like not as big of a priority since she doesn't have a job, or like any money that she makes from the Dollcast is probably just like extra fun money that she doesn't really need that much. If trans medicalism means to gatekeep trans identity behind medical diagnosis, isn't that technically just self-ID with a doctor's note, to be glib? Right, yeah, like, because you're still just going in and telling the doctor how you feel. And sometimes, historically, people have fudged the details when talking to their doctor because they know what their doctor wants to hear in order to give them the medicine that they want. So, yeah, it basically is just self-ID with extra steps. Okay, I'm gonna run to the restroom really quick, but don't go anywhere. We will continue this last 30 minutes and enjoy stream, okay? So, I'll be right back. Okay, hello, I'm back. I grabbed a protein bar that I'm gonna eat. I'll mute myself so that it's not gross, but we'll continue listening to the video. Let's go.
Trans visibility, and in a roundabout way blames gender activists for the conservative victory and their fixation on criminalizing transness.
Like, all five of us agree that this maximalist view on trans issues, this isn't what we want from the Democratic Party.
Again, it's like, it's extreme
really
victim blaming. Like, oh, the fucking crackdown on all trans people's rights is because gender nonconforming people want to be able to use the bathroom. Like, not really. It's not really what it's about.
frustrating is, I'm a little older than y'all are. In the trans movement, like, how we got all these rights was going very slowly, piece by piece, and getting buy-in from the wider public. Like, something I tweeted out last week was a copy of my Virginia birth certificate, which has been changed after I got GRS to female, right? That is an accommodation that was put into law. It took time. There was buy-in from the public. What I think has happened in the last 5 years is a lot of the trans activists have convinced Democratic lawmakers of this maximalist vision of trans liberation that essentially comes to, it's a bunch of policy positions.
What is it? What are we asking for now that's different from what we were asking about before? Like, it's just been legal for us to use the bathroom the whole time. It's like trans people are not even asking for any additional rights. This is fucking crazy. Yeah, Dollcast is so unpopular that a totally different show comes up when you Google it. If you go to their website, the Spotify link just goes to Spotify generally. That's funny.
That turn the public against us.
Yes, it's the gender activists advocating for their rights in healthcare, not at all the pocket industry of conservatives dedicated to painting a target on a marginalized group, as the Democrats did literally nothing to stem the tide of hate. You're such a good political maverick, Brianna.
Oh, and I've had so many conversations with people. They don't like Trump, but they don't like the Democratic elitists more. They hate us more. They hate progressives more. They hate the people that announce their pronouns more. They hate the people that do land acknowledgements more. Culture in the Democratic Party that I've had a front seat to. And this is how it works. Someone will go to a focus group and they will sit down and say, well, if you want to talk to black people, here's how you do it. Use these words. You want to talk to women? go use these words. You want to talk to Latinos, use these words. And what ends up coming is you're like a robot trying to go down the list and please every single member of the coalition.
This is another common occurrence for Mona Brianna to cite her political experience and say, trust me, the Democrats are taking this woke DEI stuff too far. This position has a few uses for her. It allows her to get more conservative voices to listen to her, to even see her as a reasonable trans voice, and it also allows her to further cite that experience when the Democrats inevitably fail at their flaccid electoralism attempts. The problem is that while this might be a useful talking point for Brianna, it's not based in reality, and probably more damning is actually just reciting the conservative framing on these issues back to them. See, she's accepting the ideas being pushed by people like Matt Walsh, Libs of TikTok, Charlie Kirk, and a dozen other slightly misshapen talking heads, acting as though they're good faith arguments or based in reality. Effectively, she is re-gifting to her audience the same framework that is actively being used against people like her, except she's trying to cinch the frame a little tighter so she's not in the picture. The reality, again, very evident to most people in marginalized communities, is that Kamala and Biden left those marginalized communities out in the cold in the 2024 campaign. Another reason Brianna can't talk about the real reasons Kamala failed is that Kamala supported the overwhelmingly unpopular ongoing genocide in Gaza, something Brianna bloodthirstily supports. Let's talk about episode 1, where she brings up the Trump campaign ad that said Kamala is for they, them. She notes it's an example of conservatives conflating non-binary people, drag queens, and trans women. And instead of noting that conservatives are regarding them as one and the same, the reason that they're doing that, Brianna, is because they regard any queer identities of any stripe as the same because it threatens their platform that's based on traditional stereotypes and heterosexuality. She proceeds to just talk about how trans women should separate from those ideas and abandon what should be their queer siblings. But Brianna, that won't matter to the people who are already lumping you in with them. I don't know, maybe it's her conservative roots finally showing through, but this trend of just repeating conservative talking points and agreeing with them uncritically is ever present. For example, in the same first episode, she says in the 90s, non-binary kids would be called goth.
This is why I believe so strongly in transmedicalism. I'm fully with you. Kids need to be able to play with gender. Like, we just used to call these kids goth back in the 90s, right? So, I think
non-binary people were just goth.
I want every single kid to be able to do that. I think the problem is when we're so quick to medicalize this. Kelly, I've used the talking point that you gave last episode literally 3 times this week talking to elected officials, where you were talking about how, like, when you think a lot of the people that start this, they just want to be able to talk about their feelings.
This is just repackaging the same tired social contagion talking points from TERFs who depict all trans teens as vulnerable little babies with no higher cognitive abilities, which is
Byron says, Wu literally posted about Palestinian children trying to kill a dog earlier today. This also bookends nicely with her early days of calling someone a sand N-word. That's fucking true. Wait, I was non-binary? Yeah. I do think it's funny. Part of what I like about using its pronouns is that I think its pronouns match the goth aesthetic, and that is the kind of non-binary person that I am. But there are definitely non-binary people who are like, you imagine like white AFAB glasses, button down, short sleeve t-shirt, or sorry, short button down shirt with like a really loud pattern on it. I didn't know that goth was like commonly understood to be non-binary. That's kind of funny.
Fucking wild to hear, especially from someone who claims to have gone through so much turmoil to find themselves in their 20s like Brianna. Episode 3, she opens talking about Buck Angel. Brianna seems to cozy up to people who hate her or, well, just openly disrespect her because in her eyes, they'll quote-unquote have a conversation with you. Meanwhile, she seems to think the radical trans activists can't have a conversation, probably because she blocks anyone that challenges her. See, she can take pushback from conservatives, but when people actually want to talk with her from the left, she'd rather call them, again, degenerate weirdos.
I mean, you guys know my politics. I have a lot to criticize about trans activism, but when it comes down to it, I will fight with gender criticals. I mean, my mission is our dignity, and I go to war on that every single day. And what I found when I talked to Buck is, yeah, he does have those tendencies to go down those paths, but like you can sit there and talk to him about access to children transitioning. Like, I have a view that there should be a small window open with extremely high standards. He disagrees, and he will talk about that. And I don't know. I think that's to his credit. There was tons of stuff we disagreed on.
There are other tidbits throughout the various podcast episodes that some might find vaguely strange, like when she talks about being in a medically induced ketamine hole, and that led her on a spirit journey where she was told she'd never be a woman. So apparently her inner woman is transphobic.
And it really changed my personality. It's not a mistake that a lot of the arc I'm on right now is after I did that, because it did make me feel very fearless about what I want to do. But one of the things that clinical ketamine does is you're sitting there and tripping and you're going into the K-hole, as I call it, and you really feel yourself stripped away. All these stories about yourself that you tell, all of it just gets taken apart one by one, and you're just staring there at the core of yourself. And this is so dark, but it's also really beautiful. That what I found at the core of myself repeatedly when I did that was this desire to be a woman. Like, that fundamental thing that I want and cannot have, that's the essence of what I am. And I think that leads to a melancholy and a pain that never leaves me ever.
Yeah, so she basically doesn't think she's a real woman. She's has some deeply internalized transphobia.
And, as I've come to this realization that transitioning early would not have cured that. Do y'all feel that too?
I recall her massively hating on Elon Musk before. How the turntables. Right. Yeah, now she's doing a bunch of ketamine. Don't do ketamine, kids. It fucks you up so bad, apparently. Elon Musk and Brianna Wu, these are the only examples of people I know about who've done ketamine. And it's bad results.
This pain inside of you of always wanting to be something that you can never become?
Somehow that actually makes a lot of sense for Brianna. Of all the insane claims Brianna has made, this is the one I actually have no problem believing. Another very telling incident was on episode 4 of the Dollcast, where in the first 2 minutes, Brianna talks about being in Boston, being sad about Trump winning, and on a whim, taking a vacation to Disney World in Florida with her husband, which is an insane concept to me. I don't know exactly how wealthy Brianna is, but the idea of simply taking days off, flying down and going to Disney World on a whim, that kind of capital is mind-boggling.
Crazy to me.
I'll end our time looking at Brianna's podcast with this diatribe she goes on about how the trans community has failed to police its bad actors. And at least she actually believes that, as we have plenty of evidence that Brianna took that policing personally, as she's the one who's trying to do the policing in those DMs, remember?
Fine, Lib. I think, to play devil's advocate for just a minute, would the three of you not agree with me? The trans community has completely failed to police our bad actors. We have just sat here silently as it's expanded and expanded and expanded, and you don't need gender dysphoria to be trans, and any kind of medical safeguarding is oppression. And it's really unsurprising to me why the trans movement, largely because people like me just stayed silent and didn't make a big deal out of being trans, has grown to this place where you do have people with beards going into
Brianna, you were actively lying about not being trans for 10 years.
Rooms and filming videos about it now. Don't you think we are somewhat responsible for this mess we're in?
But Brianna, the lying, manipulating, spotlight stealing, backstabbing, blame shifting, political renegade with no wins to speak of, she's the one we should be listening to. Okay. So how has this attempt to establish herself as a more measured voice for trans women actually fared?
She's trying to say my political message is the right one, but you haven't won anything.
Well, judging by the number of appearances she gets on more conservative shows like Tim Pool or Trigonometry and others, pretty successful, I guess, for her, she seems to relish being the token trans woman they can get to come on and repeat the things, again, they already believe. But she calls herself a Democrat. She doesn't like Trump, so somehow she's taking part in some grand exchange of ideas in the marketplace and having the tough conversations that need to be had. In 2024, Brianna would pivot almost entirely to argue for what she thinks are trans rights, which for her actually means excluding large parts of the trans community, as we've already gathered. Barry Weiss sums up Brianna well in the introductory paragraph of an interview piece that comes across far more cutting than I think Brianna intended. Quote, "There's no one quite like Brianna Wu. She's a trans woman who advocates passionately for trans healthcare, but also thinks many trans activists have lost the plot and are alienating women and feminists. She's a progressive who once called Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez one of the best politicians in America, but is also a staunch supporter of Israel. She was a victim of an alt-right cyber attack during the Gamergate scandal, but now thinks that the far left has become just like that mob. She's a feminist who has argued for more female representation in the gaming industry, but believes that diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts have gone way too far." End quote.
That's
if you
very
didn't
funny.
know everything we talked about in regards to
funny.
Brianna, this seems like just a compelling portrait of a beleaguered political moderate, but in context, it kind of just lays out how Brianna has slithered her way through various positions that benefit her. See, Brianna hasn't just spent the last year...
Basically, that opening paragraph is she's a hypocrite and a liar. Wow, that's damning.
Repeating insane talking points with no credibility or evidence. She's continued to try and use those talking points to cozy up with notable members of the right-wing media ecosystem. The best she's managed so far has been showing off her Porsche collection to Lauren Southern and a chat on Tim Pool's show where they talked about Tim's favorite autistic hyperfixation, Civil War. There's her appearance on Trigonometry, which is apparently a real name people chose to represent themselves and the brand they live by. Trigonometry is apparently a podcast hosted by British Ozempic Ben Shapiro and a horse what they done put a wig and glasses on. I realize I try to go by a rule not to insult people based on their appearances, but that is unfortunately superseded by my other main rule, no mercy for the British. This interview is a perfect showcase of how Brianna is turning herself into a token for conservatives. Someone who is utterly unchallenging and will acquiesce to whatever they say, but gives them the ability to literally virtue signal to show how reasonable and rational they are for being open-minded enough to have a trans activist on. Which starts by her repeating her talking point about how the Dems are losing because they follow DEI and identity politics.
I went 20 years without talking about being trans as part of my public profile. I just never wanted it to be what my
lying about being trans
career is about. But the truth is, you look at these nut jobs that are driving our civil rights right now, I really worry if someone does not stand up and go, we've got to get this movement back to sanity, back to some public policy that people can agree with. I'm terrified about what's going to happen. There's a message you can give people, which is, look, this is my body, my life. I'm going to take this medication. I will accept the responsibility myself. Just let me go make my own choices. People are on board with that. They are not on board with, we're going to announce our pronouns when we meet each other, and if you screw that up, you're going to be socially ostracized.
Yeah, see, she thinks that the Democrats lost the election because they were too radical, which is the level of expert political announcements we can count on her for. Wonder why she was never elected. Yeah, it has nothing to do with the fact that, no, the Dems kept trying to reach out to the Republicans while the actual populist movement was just left out in the cold. No, yeah, great. Good job, Brianna.
think there's an appetite in the Democratic Party right now in this moment to finally kick out the communists. I really do. I think there's an appetite to get rid of these people.
I have to admit, I have a soft spot for Kyle Kalinski's way of making fun of these sort of podcasts. Isn't it great that we can sit down and have conversations about having conversations, bro? True. Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's good to talk about optics and tactics sometimes, but I feel like that can't be like the main thing that you talk about. Otherwise, like, what are you doing? Like, are you helping? Like, why don't you instead just like model the behavior by talking about things in the way that you think they should be talked about, instead of like spending your time constantly criticizing other people for not doing it the way that you think they should be doing. Kitty says, ketamine, when used correctly, aka in a therapy setting with someone to do guided therapy that was planned ahead of time present, can be used to help with addiction, depression, and PTSD. The problem is it can be used only once per week and for no more than 6 months consistently, and you shouldn't repeat the therapy. If you're doing it outside of these circumstances, you are not helping your brain. It takes only 1 month of overuse to permanently damage your brain. Shrooms, when used similarly to the ketamine described above, are more effective than ketamine and less likely to have negative side effects long term. Okay, interesting. So ketamine does have like a reason to exist. It's just that it can't be abused or you'll get real fucked up, turns out. Okay, cool.
To have the same project as theocratic Islam. I think I really do think there's an attitude where we are going to be willing to get rid of our worst actors, including this fringe trans stuff, no matter what happens.
Yeah, Brianna's hatred for theocratic Islam is, well, she's very careful to preface it with being theocratic Islam. But again, if you remember her long history of anti-Arab racism, and you factor in her, frankly, insane genocide support, it kind of just seems like she hates brown people in a very Ben Shapiro, bloodlusty kind of way.
And Israel, it's so disappointing to me that Israel in the last 3 months has taken out the world's trash for it. You know, they've taken out Hamas, they've hurt Hezbollah, they've gone after the IRGC. And, you know, you would think Biden would be like, thank you, Israel, job well done. We've been trying to kill that guy for 20 years behind the Marine barracks bombing. Instead, it's wagging our finger.
And for somebody who
She said they took out the trash, the world's trash for them. Oh, man. Oh, my God, that's crazy.
Is talking about how we need nuance in politics, she has no problem fear-mongering about Hamas having taken over mass mobilized marches even days after the world watched IDF soldiers slaughter medical non-combatants on video. But that to her, nobody cares. Yeah, Zionism is the other major hyperfixation for Brianna. At every turn, she seems to support literally any measure taken against not just terrorists, but anyone who might even be the same skin color, or profess support for children and citizens not dying. Like, for example, the support of a Muslim ban.
And just naturally, as someone that's on the left, you're like, Muslim ban? Discriminating against someone on the basis of religion? This is a bad idea. But so much of what I've thought about post-October 7th is if you look at the countries that this ban, which came from Obama, you know, it's like these are countries with people that have some really dangerous ideology. There's a threat to American citizens. At the very least, we've got to aggressively vet the people we are letting in to make sure they are not going to start their own Amsterdam incident here in this country. So I'm so much more, I think that October 7th lifted the illusions from a lot of people's eyes across the right and the left. And I think we're going to see those kinds of.
Oh, wow. That's crazy. Just like, yeah, like what we all already knew, that all brown people are bad. Wow, that's fucked up.
Issues grappled with more honestly this time.
Yes, what a Brianna, just a principled Democrat saying the fascist president is right for trying to not let people of certain skin color into the country. Just a brilliant political mind. If you want a real look into how little Brianna seems to know about the Gaza genocide, or more accurately, how much she willfully ignores, look no further than her interview with Mark Lamont Hill, which was an absolute embarrassment for her, to say the least.
Most of the pro-Palestine movement are not Islamists. And
Gaza itself is an Islamist. Like, it operates under Sharia law, yes?
We're talking about a movement, right? I'm assuming the people that you are getting comments from are not in Gaza. Right? We're talking about the pro-Palestine movement. You're talking about people, for example, who are commenting from our exchange. Those people aren't in Gaza. The pro-Palestinian movement is a global movement. And most of the people who are pro-Palestinian aren't even Muslim, much less Islamists. Second, you can be Muslim and not be Islamist.
Yes.
And so, you know, much of even historic Palestine, and I don't mean historically, I mean like much of the region right now, most Palestinians are Muslim, but most don't live in Gaza. And most of those people would not identify as Islamists based on all the polls, based on all the data.
Really? You don't think Free Palestine at its core is
an Islamist movement?
I absolutely think that.
What does Islamist mean to you?
This project to conflate Islam with the state and to usher that into a form of government.
She basically shrugs at the idea of kids being targeted and killed, kind of just saying, well, them's the breaks in war.
Every piece of the built environment nearly of Gaza has been reduced to rubble. I mean, it's at least at 80%. Now, every school has been destroyed.
Oh, it's horrible. It's horrible looking at the pictures, yeah.
But we also see the killing of doctors. We see the killing of journalists. We see the killing of educators.
It's really easy to say child killed, all of this. There are a tremendous number of child soldiers that are working alongside PIJ, militants, working alongside Hamas. They're trained with weapons. It's horrible. Hamas is committing a war crime by using child soldiers, and that is a non-trivial number of those deaths. It's just an absolute fact. As far as, some of this technology of white phosphorus and all of that, I think those claims are really overblown.
Also need to bring up this wonderful chef's kiss of a moment where she says Kamala won't be affected by her support for Israel. I wonder why Brianna doesn't have a job at Rebellion PAC anymore.
Yeah, I think the fact that it doesn't look like the DNC is going to result in Chicago on fire, I feel really good about us just being able to kind of continue through the election.
And if that is the case, if what you prognosticate is accurate,
yes,
and I suspect it is, does Kamala Harris win?
Yeah.
It shouldn't be surprising then that, like her purposefully misunderstanding non-binary people, making it easier for her to villainize them and valorize her very smart and centrist positions, Brianna doesn't really care how much evidence of a genocide she's presented with. She has continually advocated for basically
like she just suggested that every single image that we see of a child killed in Gaza is a child soldier, which is like, I guess, a really fucking useful excuse. But would it not, like, I don't know, I guess, I don't know. It seems to be, according to her, a war crime to use child soldiers. Is it not also a war crime to, like, kill children if it's unclear whether they're enemy combatants? And it usually isn't clear that they're enemy combatants. And if they're throwing rocks, then that also doesn't make them, like, a legitimate military target. Yeah, Muslims are usually chill and cool. Agreed. I feel like this part takes her from internet gremlin to, like, actual monster, but I'm also not trans, so maybe her transphobia isn't hitting me as much. Yeah, no, I agree. I think that she's mostly just an internet gremlin. Like, of course, the things that she says are, as she put it, cruel. She repeats things that TERFs say. Brutal and cruel is how she described TERFs. But yeah, like, I do think that this is what really sends her into being, like, an actual monster, above and beyond. Yeah, it's interesting. She's not even going at this from the angle of, like, what about Jewish people? She's just like, Arabs are bad.
The entire total ethnic extermination of Gazans. And like most of the rabid Zionists, will fall back on tired arguments like Israel has a right to exist and Palestinian protesters are terrorist sympathizers, when really the only thing anyone is advocating for that she is against is Israel stopping the mass slaughter of women, children, and non-combatants. That's it. Again, this is the person who wants to present herself as a voice of reason, who knows what she's talking about. Her Zionist position might be the clearest example, but we've seen plenty how she just absolutely ignores any evidence or conversations that might actually disprove or challenge her in any way. It's legitimately sickening to watch, like her open praising of Mahmoud Khalil's DHS arrest, where she's been justifying the extrajudicial targeting of a legal immigrant because he advocated for the rights of suffering and dying people. But to her, these positions aren't extreme. Oh no, the extremists are the people who want a ceasefire. Now, if you've heard some of the things Brianna says about communists, it's very clear that much like non-binary representation and just a larger queer community in general, she has no idea what the fuck she's talking about.
Oh, this is going to be exciting. Bitching about communism.
Her lack of knowledge with these positions have anything to do with not ever talking to leftists and getting most of her ideas, or at least approaches, from mainstream conservatism. Who's to say?
I do think, actually, like, looking at, so having seen a representation of a commune, which most of us don't have, but, like, there's a representation of a commune in The Last of Us in season 1 and in season 2, and I might be kind of into it. Like, I'm into it. It is technically, like, communist to just live in a little village, like, with collective ownership and, like, you assign people to tasks and people rotate different things, and, like, there's a democratically appointed council. I guess, does that make it not a commune anymore if there's, I don't know, I guess I would assume that there could be an elected council. But, I like the idea of working collectively, like collaborating with your neighbors, like building a house together, that kind of shit. I don't know. It seems like a good idea.
This is what drives me crazy about this current trans movement. You know, when I transitioned over 20 years ago, the message was your fate is in your own hands, right? If you pass, that's up to you. If you're employed, that's up to you. You have to learn these skills so you can build a good life for yourself. That's the way it was for a long time. Instead, the trans movement has taken on this victimhood. And I'm opposed to it, not just because it's politically cowardly, but it is taking
she's like, I grew up in a sink or swim environment where people frequently just like didn't have homes because they couldn't keep a job. And that was their fault, by the way. Insane. Just tell people you're a communityist and they will be like, okay, that sounds good. True. I'm going to say I'm a communityist. When people are like, what are you politically? I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a Republican. I'm a communityist. That sounds like a really awkward, but I'll fucking do it. I will.
An entire generation of girls that are just like me and telling them the thing that isn't gonna, the thing that you're waiting for to make your life better is a communist utopia.
Like how do I even approach this idea that trans girls are indoctrinated into a communist utopia? What does communism have to do with defining concepts of gender? We could honestly be here all day watching her flap her overly thin lips, arguing total nonsense, but I really don't think it's necessary. Skip through any podcast appearance she makes or talking head segment she somehow managed to finagle. You'll see this highly qualified politico stumbling through the same lukewarm takes we've heard dozens of times with no substance behind them. But it is catching up with her. She can only be insulated by money and what connections she actually has for so long.
True.
Now, Brianna spends her days arguing online, in her own mind besieged as one of the last holdouts of true transness with other people she now apparently calls comrades, like Blair White. Recently, she claimed to have a debate with Blair because she's got nothing left to generate views except causing tired controversies. But here's how that debate went.
I agreed with you. I 100% agreed with you. To the kids' point that you brought up, Blair.
We should be personist. That would be funny to try to explain to people. Fun fact, my parents' old neighbor with some mental health issues accidentally stealing everyone's tools kind of made the whole village pro-sharing / collective aid with no money involved. That's fun. Yeah, tool libraries, exactly.
I really feel you. I do want to agree with you strongly, because I think, Blair, what you said about children growing out of it's very true. You're talking like there's a ton of surgery on children, and I fully agree with you for these FTMs. You said something at the beginning of this, which is trans women we've been run out of our own movement, which is 100% true. This non-binary fringe has come into it, and to use Free Palestine's phrase, they've colonized us.
Yeah, I agree. Just to, expand slightly, and then we can move on, is like, I completely agree. It's like,
here we are. We're two trans women that feel like our civil rights vehicle has been hijacked by lunatics. How do we, trans women, actual trans women, not pretend trans women, not non-binaries, how do we build something where we can have a say in our own healthcare again?
She may have found new friends, or at least people willing to use her as much as she uses them for exposure and clout.
I mean, the whole fucking thing is that you don't have a say in your healthcare, and that's what we are complaining about. That's what the liberationists are complaining about. Like, we don't like that you need permission and that you don't have autonomy over your medical transition, that you have to like prove to some doctor that you deserve it or something. Blair looks even weirder than Brianna. Yeah, I mean, I think you just gradually look weirder and weirder the more plastic surgery you get. And I think that they're both still actively getting plastic surgery and other procedures on a regular basis. So that makes sense to me.
But like I said at the beginning, Brianna doesn't have a community. And if the trends in her behavior, both in front and behind the scenes, are anything to go by, she'd talk shit about literally any of them in a group chat the second she thought it might get her more popularity with someone with a slightly larger audience. So it's not surprising that most of her time seems to be spent arguing on social media with accounts like me. I think the point I really decided to make this video was shortly before Brianna blocked me, where she said non-binary people aren't trans, to which I responded, I'm transgender, I'm non-binary. I go through trans healthcare. I get electrolysis. I've been on hormones for years. To which she responded by saying, I'm not non-binary, I'm transsexual. Brianna, you can call yourself whatever you want. But your problem is that because you think you've come to know yourself and realized your gender journey, you think you can speak for everyone else, and you make no effort to understand others. And that's always been true. Don't let her inability to see the world from a less privileged perspective, her lack of any kind of empathy for the struggles of someone else, distract you from the fact that first and foremost, Brianna Wu is an opportunistic, manipulative liar. She shouldn't be trusted, not because she never knows what she's talking about, but because she will say whatever she thinks you want to hear if it will get you to support her and get her a little bit more visibility. And after examining her entire career, it doesn't seem like there was some grand transformation over time. From the very beginning, her time in college and her work on an animation studio that crashed, her career has been defined by an abundance of unearned confidence, manipulation, volatility, and a lack of any consequences. So maybe this video will do nothing. Maybe it's just preaching to more of the choir who already have her blocked on Blue Sky, but I'm honestly okay with that. If, on the other hand,
it's more preaching to the choir who already have her blocked on Blue Sky. It's me.
Were to lose her power and influence, it should be seen as due rewards for her history of lying and coercion. If she has no friends or no political career because she is finally seen by all as the corrosive, toxic person she is, I'd have no problem with that. And even if all of that were to happen, she'd be fine because she's fucking rich. But regardless how any of these things behind the scene coming to light affects her, I can say one thing with certainty. In the end, Brianna won't have anyone left to stand up for her. She won't have anyone left to bring her on podcasts and pay her for being a consultant, at least not if she continues the way she has for decades. And that has nothing to do with a YouTuber compiling a deep dive. It's all by her hand. Goodwill is not an unlimited resource, and Brianna has stripped the mountains of her career dry of any goodwill she managed to wring from Gamergate, from her political career, and from what sparse experience she actually has. So in the end, if Brianna Wu ends up alone, isolated, and hollow, it's not because of the rest of the world. It's because it's what she's always been building towards through her own actions.
Deep dive.
Hello, everybody, and thank you.
Deep dive. Okay, listen. What we're going to do now is we're going to go hit the like button on this. We're going to hit the like button, and we're going to leave a comment, okay? Okay? We're going to go over here, and we're going to click the like button, and then we're going to come down here and say, excellent. Deep dive, worthy of several watch throughs. So much BS to wade through. There we go. There we go. I made a comment. You make a comment. You do it. You do it. 'Cause I said so. It is time. We're not done streaming just yet. I ended it a little soon on Sunday, so I feel like I should try to make it to the end today. So another 30 or 40 minutes of chit-chatting about whatever. Yeah, I can't imagine going, like, I don't know, man. Maybe it's because I'm autistic, but I can't imagine trying to, like, lie my way through my career like that. Also can't imagine somebody giving me $200,000 to fucking blow on making a studio. Like, Jesus. I'm sitting here wondering, like, if I wanted to take some college classes, if I could afford that, and like, that's not even that much. Like, taking a few college classes is not even that much money. It's only a couple $100, and still I'm sitting here like, I don't know if I can. That's why I'm gonna get a part-time job this summer. But yeah, that's wild. And like, it's so hard to say, like, is she even legitimately hateful, or is she just opportunistic? I mean, I think probably that she just is hateful in the way that conservatives are hateful, like on a profound level. You know, she was young when 9/11 happened, but like young enough to be, or like old enough to be aware of it. And her parents were politically active and like supported George Bush's campaign financially. So like, I think that she probably just is super racist toward Arabs, and very, very transphobic, even to herself. She's one of those people who's like, she probably would say things like, oh, if I could choose not to be trans, then I would. I don't know if she's all the way there, but she seems like she could end up there, you know what I mean? And I can't believe, like, she lied. She actively lied about being a cis woman for so long. Yeah, Mariana Trench Drive. I cannot imagine being in a position where it is literally impossible for me to be able to blow that amount of money and face no lasting consequences. Yeah, I don't even know what I would do if I had $200,000. Much less if I had $200,000 to spend on shit that doesn't fucking matter. Like, wow, that's, yeah, I don't know. That's wild. Oh, yeah, the Dust Bowl Wikipedia that I pulled up earlier. Oops. Oh, man. Go ahead and close that. Oh, the instructions for kombucha. Instructions for kombucha. I don't need that anymore right now. I'll put it down. Okay, put it down. Yeah, that's... Whew. Appreciate the deep dive. And I'm sorry if anybody was bored at any point during that. I don't often make a habit of like watching other people's videos, so hopefully it's like you appreciate it as a rare, occasional thing. Truly one of the deepest dives. Brianna had a lot of Santos-esque attributes. Like George Santos? I can't remember hardly anything about him, except that I just watched John Oliver's episode of Hot Ones, and he mentioned George Santos and being like, I ended up kind of loving this dude despite myself because of all the crazy shit that he was constantly doing. Not bored, more disgusted. Yeah, no, fair enough, fair enough. The subject matter was offensive. Yeah, of course. Yeah, and I knew about some of it, but some of it was definitely unexpected. Like the deep undercurrent of racism was kind of surprising. Just how far back it goes, and then how she hasn't evolved on that at all, and doesn't seem to feel a need to evolve on that at all. That's like one of the weirdest parts to me. I understand being a self-hating trans woman, like that's not new. But to call yourself a progressive and still say things like Israel is taking out the world's trash for it by doing a genocide in Gaza is fucking unhinged. That's a wild thing to say. Oh. I drink water. I like filled this up right before stream. I have drank about 40 ounces of water since we started. And I have to drink that much water, or I will have a bad time. It's not too warm in here though, which is good. I am like a little worried about later this week. It's supposed to be quite warm, I think. And then next week too, starting to get warmer. I'm all for bodily autonomy and not judging others for their personal choices while condemning people's actions that harm others. Yeah. But I'm also like, I want to be accurate. If I condemn people's actions that harm others, I want to be accurate. You know, and that's one of the things that I think is one of the differences between Democrats and Republicans, or like you could say between progressives and conservatives. So like a conservative like Brianna Wu can justify the murder of children by being like, well, they were probably working with Hamas anyway, you know? Like she's willing to just assume that there's a good excuse to kill children, whereas I'm like, you know, because the idea there is like, oh, well, that kid is hurting someone, but I care about whether the kid is actually hurting anybody, and they're not. So, and it's, you know, it's similar to when people are talking about, oh my God, these immigrants in the United States are gonna, they're gonna fucking kill your kids and eat your dog or whatever. If that was really happening, obviously I would be concerned, and obviously I would want to do something about that. It's just that that's fucking not true. So, like, you know, it's just giving a shit about being accurate, maybe? Tomorrow's supposed to be up to 81. Ooh. Are you, Mabs, did you say, are you in Florida? Is that what you said earlier? Also, I don't know who it was last time in chat, but whoever recommended like making a slow cooker chicken parmesan with cream cheese. I made it last night and it was really good. I'm going to change things about it next time, but it was really, really, really good. I put like an entire bag of frozen spinach in there. Yes, it was like simultaneously very healthy and very unhealthy because I put in way more cream cheese than I needed to. I think the difference between liberal and conservative is that conservative judges the individual versus judging the action. People can change, learn, grow, and adapt. What a person did before does not have to be what they do in the future. I suppose. I mean, I genuinely do think that there is a truth bias, like, on the Democrats' side, that, like, I don't think Republicans and conservatives really care about what's true. They care about what feels true. Oh, 81 in the Willamette Valley tomorrow. Oh, fuck me. Okay. Oh, shit. Yeah. It's going to be hard if it's that hot tomorrow and there's Takis. Oh, I'm going to have to blast my air conditioner in the morning. Leave my window open all night. trace elements solution concentrate is always good to put some drops in your water. I just put lemon in my water, and then a few times a day I go grab a pinch of salt and eat it. Yeah, I hear you, but did you consider that brown people scary and bad? Oh, one difference. Sure, sure. Yeah, one difference being that liberals judge the action versus conservatives judging the individual. Yeah. That's why someone said it earlier in chat that, like, white people do something fucked up and get a slap on the wrist, and then, like, a black person does something relatively minor and they have the entire book thrown at them. You know? It's because ultimately it's not about what crime you committed. You're being punished for who and what you are. Excuse me. Oh my gosh. Burpee boy. Oh, what do people have going on for the rest of the week? What's going on for the rest of the week? I have Takis tomorrow, and then I don't think I have anything going on Friday, and I also don't think I have any plans on Saturday this weekend. And then of course stream on Sunday. So I'm just kind of trucking along. I'm gonna exercise. I'm gonna maybe try to, like, plan some things out for later this year. Maybe apply to a few jobs. Yeah, just kind of keeping on. Maybe have a couple difficult conversations. Sometimes you have to do that. What's everybody else doing for the weekend? What even is it? Oh, tomorrow is Beltane, and I don't have any Beltane plans. I have been really super depressed, actually, for the past couple of weeks. So I'm a little bit bummed out. I don't have any Beltane plans tomorrow. I'm not even sure how to make short-term Beltane plans. I don't like it when liberal people get a little money and suddenly everything wrong with the Dems is the progressives' fault. True. D&D Friday, yes! Good stuff. I know someone who has D&D on Sunday this week. D&D seems fun. I don't think I have, like, enough friends or enough time to commit to doing it right now. I'm gonna eat no hard-boiled eggs and let no one say otherwise. Oh, I should make deviled eggs. I've been craving them recently. I've had a couple cravings recently. I've been craving tuna salad and I've been craving deviled eggs. I have satisfied my tuna... Well, that's not entirely true. I have eaten tuna salad 3 times. That does not mean I have satisfied my tuna salad craving. But I do think I have a craving for deviled eggs that has not been satisfied. When was the last time I even had deviled eggs? I maybe made some for Thanksgiving last year. Or I think maybe I decided on purpose not to do a Thanksgiving dinner last year. I was like, we're about to move. I can't, like, spend all this extra money on Thanksgiving dinner. My only Beltane plans is to go for a wildflower walk. Yeah, that would be nice. I just don't want to go anywhere. It's going to be really warm tomorrow. None for me, thanks. That's fine. More for me. I will eat all of them. It's a little funny when the D&D party walks into a 60-10 damage-dealing monstrosity, all guns blazing. Yeah. Took too much time off to take time for Beltane. Oh. I guess I could celebrate on Friday. Maybe I'll make a point of that. Maybe I'll make a point. Yes, because this weekend is going to be back in the 60s and possibly rainy. Oh, God. I love the rain. Every time it's even a little bit cloudy outside, I'm like, I love you so much. But yeah, maybe I'll just make a plan to celebrate on Friday. I think it's me and Arden tomorrow. I was going to go to a crafting group at a nearby brewery last weekend, but chickened out. I guess I'll work on the chainmail collar this weekend. It's basically going to be chainmail neck corset. Ooh, that's fun. I've looked at some stuff like that before, like cute chainmail necklace pieces. Maybe not a neck corset, but I want to know what sort of D&D character Josie and Arden would make. Maybe I'll have to ask them at separate occasions. I don't know. I don't think I know either of them well enough to be able to guess that. I feel like Josie might be like a priest. Or cleric, I guess is what it's called in D&D. And what would Arden do? I feel like Arden would have fun as a barbarian. I don't know if those are accurate reads. I'll have to ask them, like, hey, I think that this is what you guys would play in D&D, but what would you actually play? Probably both of them have played it before, and they'll probably be like, oh, well, these are the characters that I have played in the past. Whereas I started a D&D campaign and only went to like 3 of them before I was like, guys, you guys want to do this super late in the week during like the work week. Like I can't be staying up until fucking midnight on a work week. Yeah, Warcraft reigned, true. I haven't even been wanting to play WoW recently. I did do some Arathi Basin this weekend though. You know, I've been, oh yeah, I should check my ratings. Because oh man, I want to get into the PvP room and start buying things. Anyway, yes, I haven't even been wanting to play World of Warcraft, except that I've been PvPing a little bit during the weekends, because what else is the point of World of Warcraft if you don't PvP? I could see Josie playing Cleric. I was thinking the same, Barbarian or Sorcerer for Arden. Yeah, that's just like my personality gauge. My intention was to play a druid with like the homebrew classification of like the Circle of Spores, which is like it's a non-traditional style of druid. Oblivion Remastered. I'm so happy for you guys playing Oblivion Remastered. I was considering buying The Last of Us, but it is $50 or $60. So that's not going to happen. Also, like, do I actually need to experience the game, which is going to force me to do the zombie fighting, or can I just watch the TV show again? The likelihood is that I am going to just watch the TV show again. In fact, I am watching the TV show over again. I was midway through watching episode 3 earlier, and then I had to stop because I was like, this is going to make me emotional, and I don't really want to cry right now. So I decided to skip it. For now. The Last of Us has been re-released almost as much as Skyrim. Yes, that's true. This weekend, I will be chasing a baby that will probably have put the last bits together and finally be walking. Walking baby! That's exciting. Love that. It's good when the babies start to be a little bit more independent. How long is baby? When? I can't remember when this child was born. Is this like an early walker, or is this just about when it's expected in the developmental stages? Babies. Strange little creatures that I have no desire to be around. A few weeks will be 1 year. Oh, damn. Shit. I thought that it was only like 8 or 9 months. Wow. It's, whew. May baby. $50 donation from Drea. Thank you. Now you can get Oblivion. I'm probably not going to get Oblivion. There have been a couple times where I've bought a game because someone recommended that I buy it, and then I ended up like not playing it at all. So, you know, it just seems polite to be honest and not buy a game that I don't need when I do need groceries. $76.32 for today. I don't know if we're going to hit the goal in the like couple minutes before I'm ready to get off of here. But I am pretty much ready to get off of here in a couple minutes. Come back, chat. I miss you. We get to be Taurus together. Fun. Well, also that means that it's your birthday around now, so happy birthday to you too. Oh, he's not even in here. The cat is not in here. I was gonna say, wow, I can just pick up this cat if we get to $100 in donations, but nope. You can load up on hundreds of loaves of bread and oceans of wine in Oblivion, though. Silly. Ooh, I think May is like Oregon Wine Month. I'm excited. I actually really do enjoy wine. I'm not good with like pairings or whatever. I just drink wine. But God, I love wine. It's delicious. Aw, Shakespeare. Late in the stream. I know you won't see this for a long time, but I hope that you have a good time at your Spaceballs themed rave. That sounds like a fucking great time. I should watch that movie. We actually talked about it, I think maybe like after the podcast we recorded this week, but we were talking about maybe watching Spaceballs for the Many Worlds Hypothesis podcast on Gayfesh's YouTube channel. Not sure where you would find wine around Portland, a totally dry city. I mean, there are vineyards all over the place here. Is that a joke? There are vineyards all over the place. There's an organism that is a transitional between animals and fungi. It's called Terettasphoria, and would have been more realistic for The Last of Us, but everyone is aware of cordyceps. I was watching a doctor respond to cordyceps, respond to the whole thing, and he was like, it would make sense. It was a little bit dry. I was like, what? Like, there's wine everywhere. So confused. You can tell it's late in the stream because I'm tired. But yeah, the doctor that I was watching respond to the Last of Us was saying that if the placement of the bite matters for how quickly you start to lose your shit, it probably is like a hallucinogenic compound that's being released into your body, and not that like the fungus has made its way to your brain in that amount of time. So yeah, I thought that was kind of interesting conceptually. So what is happening is it's a hallucinogenic effect. Fun times. Okay, I'm tired. On Takis. I'll try to remember to post a link in the Discord if you guys want to see me in Arden talk to some transphobic people. Usually is how it goes. But then I will see you all on Sunday for our regular scheduled show. So thank you all for joining me. Happy Bieltana. I hope that you have a good May 1st, May Day, whatever it is. I want you to find an excuse to celebrate tomorrow or this weekend. For context, the pagan holiday Bieltana Beltane, it is associated with fertility. It's like the pagan Valentine's Day. So do with that what you will. Very common to get married on May Day. So yeah, much love. See y'all next time.